Welcome back to the studio, and what we have been discussing is the preamble to a discussion that is starting at Serena Katonga Hall, which is the 5th Economic Summit by NTV, Minister of Finance and DFCU Bank. And the theme is securing socioeconomic transformation amidst Covid-19. The discussion is going to be about strategies to accelerate both recovery and growth. I'm sure you're seeing the split screen, and in the room there are guests invited, but you are free to join us on air. You're already joining us, and we are glad. The discussion is going to be serious and designed to find solutions on how we can move. January 2022, the open is going to happen, but what's going to happen after that? And I'm joined by Sandra. Sandra is at Serena. We can see that she's inviting our MD, General Manager, Mr. Molo. I think he's giving his opening speech. We would like to take you over there so that you can join the proceedings. I want to thank my guests, Dr. Maggie and Stephen. Let's go to Serena now.
For today, DFCU Bank, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our viewers online and at home, all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th Annual Minister of Finance Planning and Economic Development and NTV Economic Summit. We have held this summit for 5 years now, together with the Minister of Finance. The theme for this year is securing socioeconomic transformation amidst COVID-19. What strategies will be employed to accelerate both recovery and growth? In addition, as you may know, the world is still ravaged by the COVID pandemic, with a number of uncertainties, including unilateralism, disruption from emerging technologies, insecurity in the region, sluggish growth of domestic revenues, and the debt burden which most countries still face in the continent today. Not only does Uganda need to recover its economy to the pre-COVID trend, but grow even faster to address pre-existing challenges like rapid population growth, associated increasing demand for services, the debt issue, vulnerability, jobless growth, and the sluggish socioeconomic transformation which is within our midst. We remain confident that today's summit will focus on the economic agenda in line with government's plan and policies aimed at realizing recovery, accelerating growth in order to secure socioeconomic transformation in the country, while also mobilizing domestic resources for growth with jobs. We are also optimistic that what government has put in place will spur production and productivity in all sectors of the economy by strengthening linkages, promoting tourism in an ever-changing global environment, and identifying how to harness new economic drivers for inclusive and sustainable growth. Mr. Permanent Secretary and Secretary to the Treasury, sir, if we are to realize socioeconomic transformation that we desire, if we are to achieve the middle-income status dream that we had pre-COVID, government must function as one unit. Government must function as one unit. Therefore, a critical pillar on realizing this dream will be enforcement of discipline in planning implementation. Once there is still no discipline in implementation of government plans, low absorption of budget will remain. We are confident that your new regime will only build on what your predecessors had started on and lead us to the economic liberation that we desire as a country, for God and my country. It is therefore my pleasure to invite you, sir, Mr. Permanent Secretary and Secretary to the Secretary to give us the speech of hope. I welcome you, sir.
We need the Secretary today. Thank you very much, Mr. General Manager, NTV, and your team, my staff at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, all of the invited guests, and the viewers who are out there, the viewers of NTV. I would like to begin by thanking our organizers, co-organizers of this 5th summit, the NTV, as well as all the participants. It is very constructive for us to have open dialogue on matters such as the one we are going to discuss today. This theme is timely, and I look forward to having a very good conversation here. His Excellency, the President, declared 2021-26 the term for socioeconomic transformation. He guided us to focus resources and efforts to creating wealth, jobs, and incomes for all Ugandans. But in particular, the proportion of Ugandans who are still in subsistence economy. We therefore have designed our budget strategy for the next financial year, 2022-23, to kickstart this transformation agenda. Of course, as we are designing this strategy, we are mindful that we are embarking on this agenda at a time when the economy and the global environment in which we have to operate have been shattered by the Covid-19 pandemic. The IMF forecasts, they are indicating that, the forecast of IMF indicating that the global economy experienced a GDP loss of 3.1% in 2020. The global GDP was estimated at around $84.5 trillion in 2020, registering almost $2.96 trillion of lost economic output. In Uganda, we lost over 3 percentage points of GDP growth per annum during the past 2 years, despite the unbelievable resilience our economy has shown. This notwithstanding, our economy grew by 3% in 2019-20, and it was among a few economies in the world that registered positive growth that year. Among the major economies, only China, at 2.3%, had positive growth in 2020. Economies like US at 4.5%, minus 4.5%, UK minus 9.8%, German minus 4.6%, Japan same 4.6% in minus growth, India negative 7.3%, South Africa, negative 6.4. Just to put in context, the world has faced an unprecedented level of recession in recent years. The good news is that the global economy now is on a recovery trajectory. Even as the pandemic resurges in some parts of the world, the IMF is telling us that the global economy this year, 2021, is projected to grow by 5.9% and will further expand by 4.9% next year, 2022. This recovery is based on policy support and rapid vaccine rollout. So for those economies that have supported their business communities, their households, but also rolled out very fast the vaccines, have seen rapid recovery. Therefore, our strategy for next year and the medium term is based on mainly three objectives. We have a three-objective strategy for Uganda. During the next financial year and over the medium term, our economic policy will seek to achieve the following. Number one, mitigation of COVID-19 impact on business activity as well as livelihoods by doing just two things. Number one, widespread vaccination of Ugandans to fully reopen the overall economy and keep it open. And number two, financial support to businesses that have been hit hard by the pandemic. The second objective is to speed up socioeconomic transformation by mainly we are going to reprioritize the budget to redirect resources towards wealth and job creation, industrialization, export promotion, and other areas with high return on investment. And number three, we are going to sustain national security and macroeconomic stability as key fundamentals for economic recovery, growth, as well as transformation. Where exactly are we going to invest more? Number one, as I've already alluded in the first objective, vaccination of Ugandans so that we can fully reopen the economy and stay open. We are going to do everything possible to ensure that vaccines are procured and also they reach every corner of Ugandans. So the leadership and the people of Uganda across the spectrum should encourage each other to get a vaccine. It's the only game changer for us to get this economy back, because it has been tested everywhere else. Secondly, we are also going to spend on stimulus packages as well as payment of domestic arrears in order to boost aggregate demand and support businesses to restart. We need aggregate demand back, and we feel if we could get the resources, the little resources that we have, reprioritized towards getting some stimulus packages, which already my minister has announced a few of them, and more we shall be supporting them as resources can permit, but also we pay domestic arrears to those businesses which have been verified, and as well as individuals as government owing money to them. That will help to get the aggregate demand back. Number 3 is agro-industrialization. We are going to put emphasis, and this time we are saying internally, getting money speak to the beautiful statements. If it is agro-industrialization, light manufacturing, as well as industrial park infrastructure, that's where we would want to see some of the resources we have going. We are also going to invest in the COVID emerging opportunities for export promotion and import substitution. Those businesses and individuals that have come up to substitute some of the imports that we used to spend on, and also those that are producing for export, we are going to support them. The other one is digitization. We want to digitize the economy by mainly investing in e-commerce, as well as automation of government processes and government systems. We are also supporting scientific innovations, including protection of intellectual property. Market entry is another area we want to support. Market entry. I'm choosing these words very carefully. We are moving from market access to supporting market entry. We have signed a number of agreements. We would want to enter those markets. In UAE, the United Arab Emirates, in the EU, in the highly anticipated African Continental Free Trade Area. We would want to support the efforts of our business people entering those markets. We are also not forgetting our need to bridge the infrastructure gap. So we are continuing with infrastructure development, but this time more emphasis is put on road maintenance, energy transmission, reliability and affordability, rail rehabilitation of our rail line as we wait for the standard gauge, as well as urban transport. We are also going to support commercialization of oil and gas so that we can finalize the FID to attract foreign direct investment in this area, and on this add-on mineral beneficiation. Those who are entering into the area of adding value to our minerals, as you know, Uganda has a policy on banning export of raw ore, mineral ore. We want to add value to these minerals. Restoration of tourism and hospitality sector is also high on our agenda by supporting rebranding Uganda so that we can get here more than just tourists. We are working closely with our institutions, Uganda Tourism Board, I don't know whether Lily is here, to ensure that we can get this sector moving again to support our recovery. We want also to deepen financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is going to be deepened mainly by implementing the parish development model to support the population that is still in subsistence to join the monetized economy, to recapitalize microfinance support center to support the circles through which many Ugandans who are excluded from the formal financial sector access money, support more the vocationalized enterprises through a Myoga fund. We are going to upscale our small recovery fund, which is a new baby, to support those small businesses which had been left out in the previous efforts, because these are formalized small businesses that may not qualify for the efforts I've mentioned so far, but also they were not qualifying for interventions such as UDB funding, as well as UDC, Uganda Development Corporation, to co-invest with those businesses which are strategic but are facing challenges due to COVID. And also we are going to invest in a national payment switch so that we can reduce the cost of moving money. The last area, but not least, which we are targeting is public sector reform. We want to achieve more efficiency and effectiveness of government by rationalizing government, ensuring that we automate the government systems, as I said. So we are rolling out e-procurement. We want to start procuring online, electronically, to bring more efficiency. As I always say, imagine procuring in the same way we have a WhatsApp group. I think many of us in Uganda now, we belong to a certain WhatsApp group. When you are typing, all the members are seeing that you are typing. When you delete, all people see that you are deleting, you have deleted something. They even ask, what have you deleted? So if we are procuring like that, then we shall reduce on these are the conversations we are having in Uganda, procurement-related corruption and so on. But also we are introducing e-education. We are investing in systems that are going to monitor and inspect teachers and learners, so that we are not running around to look for teachers. What is the financing strategy of these things? They look ambitious. Where will the money to fund these interventions come from? First, as a country, we are going to learn to live within our means. We are going to stop budgeting incrementally. That points to budget reform. We are saying that the winners in our budget should gain by taking from losers, rather than claiming incremental resources. This is the disease that causes endless borrowing. Because there is a budget, we call it a baseline. And every year, we want that budget to grow by getting more money for those priority areas without taking money from those who have lost the priority. So we are saying we should make the budget more redistributive, not distributive. we must promise in the plans what we can pay for in the budget. And this is a message to all accounting officers across government. As we prepare the budget framework papers for our programs, we should promise in the plans what we are able to pay for in the budget, so that we avoid escapist planning, as we call it in economics. So we are going to make the budget less accommodative to fiscal indiscipline. We should restore fiscal discipline. The tendency to assume that spending must be higher next year than it was the previous year in every vote should stop if we want to live within our means. Supplementary budgets are going to be only for emergencies and unforeseen expenditures. Recently, we have had reviews, internal reviews. Why are we having this disease of supplementaries? We are finding that it is actually self-inflicted. Votes budget for things which are not critical so that they can fit within the cash limits given to them, well knowing that the critical things, when they come up at the beginning of the year, everybody from the ministries to cabinet to parliament will say this is critical. We should give it a supplementary. So we should note that that also has been discovered, and we should deal with it. Like elsewhere, we are facing revenue shortfalls and tightening room for borrowing. This is not only for Uganda. Actually, Uganda is still in a far more, better position than many of our peers. Although in this country, perhaps we tend to be more enthusiastic, which is very good. And because of this, therefore, the most pragmatic way out of this is to increase allocative and technical efficiency. So we are starting with that first. And this calls for strict adherence to agreed priorities by both the bureaucrats and the politicians. Therefore, to finance the budget, we are going to do the following. We are going to implement practical actions under the domestic revenue mobilization strategy to generate more revenue, to reduce the share of the budget that is financed through borrowing. In this, we are going to enforce more compliance instead of introducing new taxes. My minister will announce the actual measures that we are going to undertake to increase revenue without increasing the tax burden on the typical groups of taxpayers. Because we have discovered that most of these taxes fall on the same people. So you are like punishing those who are compliant, while those who are avoiding or evading, they're getting away with it. So we are more on compliance now. We are going also to enforce and enhance a better management portfolio for our public debt in line with our new Charter for Fiscal Responsibility to ensure that our national debt stays sustainable. The key word there is staying sustainable. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Ugandans, the national debt of Uganda is sustainable. We want it to remain sustainable. in some of our smaller conversations, some people have portrayed a picture that Uganda has overborrowed. That's not true. Our debt to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the region, but we want to keep it within our Charter for Fiscal Responsibility, which already we have gotten through Parliament. I can give you some data. Kenya has a tax to GDP ratio of 72%, Rwanda 66%, Burundi 76%, Ethiopia 56%, Tanzania 38%, and Uganda 49.9%. We are going to borrow largely concessionally or longer dated commercial in order to reduce the refinancing risk, because that's where we have seen more risk. We are also reviewing projects to identify those which are poorly performing, to release resources or at least free our fiscal space to get money to those which can add value to people of Uganda. Before I conclude, I would want to give you a very small glimpse in our state of the economy. Our GDP by June 2021 stood at 148 trillion shillings, equivalent to 40.5 billion US dollars. And by end of last financial year, June 2021, we registered a GDP growth rate of 3.4. Our GDP per capita, if we agreed today that all Ugandans let us share equally the GDP that we generated last year, each Ugandan would get 3.5 million shillings a year, which is equivalent to $954 in June 2021, and this increased from 916 US dollars or 3.4 million in June 2020. Our GDP is projected to grow at 3.8% this financial year, and the overall GDP will expand to 159 trillion shillings or $44 billion next financial year. That's the projection we have. Our trade balance has been performing in such a way that both our imports and exports have reduced in recent times, except our major traditional exports. Coffee is still doing well. Coffee exports increased from $156 million in Q4, quarter 4 of 2020-21, to $212 million in quarter 1 of this financial year. But non-coffee exports reduced from $528 million. From $1,085 million to $528 million during the same period. This reduction is mainly due to reduction in gold exports. Equally, imports have reduced from $2.9 billion in Q4 to $1.9 billion in Q1. Our inflation has remained within target, although it has started picking up to 2.6% in November from 1.9% in October this year. The exchange rate has appreciated to about 3,552 shillings per dollar in recent months, an appreciation of 1.4%. Lending rate has increased from 16% in July to 19.7% in October. And since Matthias is here, we will tell us why they are charging us more money at a time when we need help from them. Generally, the business tendency index, which index tends to look at the perception the business community has to the economy, has been improving since July from 45.9 to 51.9 in November. This business tendency index is compiled by Bank of Uganda by asking business executives, like some I see in this room, what they feel about the prospects in the economy. And many business executives are indicating they are very optimistic that the economy is going to do well than it has been doing, mainly because of our promise to reopen the economy. And we are looking forward to reopening the economy. As a Secretary to the Treasury, I really implore Ugandans, the only now savior we have is vaccination. Let us vaccinate ourselves. It's not dangerous to our lives. I'm vaccinated. I'm here. I haven't died. And also, I am okay. So let's get vaccine and we reopen the economy early next year. In conclusion, we are currently focused on preparing for the post-pandemic economy by reversing the pandemic-induced setbacks, particularly to human capital development. We want to take our children back to school after nearly 2 years home. And we are going to fully support this effort. As government or as a ministry, we are also facilitating new growth opportunities, digitization, and ensuring sustainable public finances. The past 2 years have been a pain to each of us. But I want to assure you that the future, according to the economic spectacles, looks very bright. Support our reforms to create an economy that works for everyone in the country. I thank you very much.
Another round of applause to the PSST. Thank you so much. I want to believe that there are key questions that have triggered the minds of the people that are here. We are seeing you talk about financial inclusion, that is the parish development model, but also bringing out the aspects of vaccination in order to see that our general population gets back to school, then gets to reopen, and in operation, I mean, different sectors truly need to start operating. Now, do remember to note down your questions. Later, we need to hear from you, but we want to hear from the general audience. I did mention earlier that this conversation is for you, but also for the general people or Ugandans that are not able to join us today. So we want to get an idea of how the 2 years of the pandemic have treated them. So do allow us to play for you 3 videos. And in these 3 videos, we're going to be looking at 3 sectors. Number 1 is tourism. We did see for the last 2 years, I should put it that way, that people are still in business, but we're not having tourists coming through. So imagine as a person who is in business, you're selling your crafts, you have a place that usually attracts the tourists and they're not coming through. So what is your thought? This is why we want to show you this video. And we want to get down to the local person, you know, that person in downtown Kampala. How has it been for them during this COVID-19 pandemic? How are they dealing with the challenges that COVID-19 has presented? So we want to hear a story, a short story from an individual business owner in downtown Kampala, just to understand the perspective from a local person. And finally, education. Now, I don't have children yet, but I know some of us here have children. For the very first time, we were stuck with children. Now, so many parents said, we cannot do this anymore. So we want to hear from the parents' perspective. Even for you that are here, really, how was it staying with your children for more than 10 hours? Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen in to these videos.
By the time COVID-19 came, we are limping. This is what happened. People talk about 2020, but that was the climax. What happened, we started experiencing COVID in 2018 and 2019. I remember in August, many people fell sick, including myself. And for the first time in my life, I was in bed for 3 days. This cold, which I never understood what it meant. And other people were admitted hospitals, and they were complaining, they were diagnosed as pneumonia. Some people actually died. But by the end of 2019, China was already in trouble. And we're reading it in the papers. So by the time we woke up in Uganda, the effect had already been there, because people are not coming in, starting with like that Christmas of 2019. I would say it should have been the high season. People weren't coming in, and January, February of 2020, people weren't coming in because there were lockdowns elsewhere, and people were worried about traveling. That is, so by the time the lockdown happened, we were already in red. So when it happened, it just buried us. And as I'm talking now, we have not yet recovered. People, you see what happened is, when people are not happy, when people are depressed, they do not spend, even if they have the money. But when people are happy, they spend. They can even borrow to spend.
It should have been good. It has been good before COVID. But right now, I can't say the same, though we are picking up slowly. It's the most difficult experience to manage such a business without the tourists, because we originally have been used to walk-in customers who are coming in as tourists. And it has been extremely difficult to adjust from waiting for a customer to come in and maybe going online to look for them as they look for us, because some of us who are not online then, we were selling like to a walk-in customer. And now, internet being very expensive, Facebook was closed, you remember, so it has been extremely difficult managing this business, but we are trying slowly by slowly.
Then we have another problem of rent. We are tenants of government, Uganda National Cultural Center. We pay ground rate, not rent, because the structure is ours. We have been appealing for them to waive the years we are locked down, because they're not only 1 year, 2 years. The whole of 2020 and now 2021. So we have a bill of close to 300 million. Well, we don't even know where we can get it from. So we're appealing to government to waive it so that we can start now thinking about how to focus on production and selling and marketing.
Right now, what we'll be looking at is what the government told us to push Bubu. Buy Uganda, support Uganda. It is not yet in place, because if Bubu was in place, I would be doing gifts for the government sending to China, to government parastatals, but now I'm yet to find a government official here.
What I've tried to do is to put my business online, have a Facebook page in the names of Alinda Crafts. I first posted on my personal page, and I realized it was good to separate the two. Now I have a personal page in the names of Alinda Crafts. Somehow that's how I get business. And I'm a member of other organizations. That one is also another network, because I'm also a member of UWIL and a member of National Arts and Cultural Crafts Association. I have friends whom I send my pictures to. Of course, all that is data. If you have data, it is possible, but data is expensive. Not all of us can afford that. So that is the other way I've been trying to put my business outside.
We've been in lockdown for almost 2 years. But like the white man says, when the going gets tough, you also toughen in one or the other. So we've learned to work within ourselves. How? We are now not looking at the white man coming in, because we have quite a few. But we have our own natives here that can support us. So now we are looking through our WhatsApp groups, our OBs, our OGs. They're supporting us well, and we're surviving, because you can't keep this place open for all these 2 years and you say you're not getting something. We're getting something. although it's not the dollar, it's the Ugandan shilling. And the Ugandan shilling comes with a bit of a discount, with a question, can you deliver? But we're handling it in one way or the other. It is not a smooth ride because it is challenging. Challenging in a way that you make 2 sales a week, and your landlord will still insist they need their money. And you have to pay the money on time. You won't tell them because the sales are low, or therefore we have to forego the rent. No, you have to pay the rent in time. You have to facilitate your workers. But in one way or the other, we break even.
Actually, I don't think we're in recovery. We are in resuscitation. We are in coma. Recovery is somebody who had an injury and is being treated and is conscious. We are in coma, economic coma. What is happening now is resuscitation. But what is being done is not the right way they are doing it. First of all, they must inject money directly into people's pockets. Taxes must be waived or halved. Another thing, government must change their way of spending. They should not continue spending the way they spend. They should change their lifestyle. See, they don't make money. We make the money, they spend it. So what they should do, they should review their lifestyles.
Akawuka tekannaba kujja, ebintu byali bitambula bulungi, naye oluvannyuma lw'okuba nti nno munnaye twafuna buno obuzibu bw'akawuka, munnaye twakosebwa bizinensi ezakka wansi, emirimu tegikyali bulungi, twatuula ebbanga ddene ng'ojja ku mulimu tokola n'okwata ekkubo n'oddayo tofuna bakasitoma wadde tolaba muntu yenna yenna. Mbutuufu emirimu gyasanyalala nnyo, gyasanyala era gikyasanyaladde teginnaba kutereera bulungi. Tetunnaba kufuna kizibu kino kya bulwadde. Nali nkola ku bakirayansi bangi nga tufuna ab'okusiba, tufuna aba ritaaki. In fact ng'olunaku osobola okukola ku bakirayansi nga 20, 15 oba 12. Naye obulwadde we bwajja oluusi okola ku bantu 2 oba n'otakolerako ddala oba n'okola ku muntu omu oba 3. Lw'okoze nnyo tosukka bantu 4.
Before COVID-19, I used to get my own fees as well, and I was working in a bar, Vegas Chill Out and Restaurant, located in Tula Road, Mperere, as a supervisor. And so I used to get my tuition. When COVID-19 came, it really affected us because the bars and the entertainment industry where the artists used to come and perform to people were all closed down. And I found myself in a very hard situation. I almost dropped out because I had no tuition at all. But with the efforts of my friends and colleagues, I managed to get this motorcycle. And apparently, I'm doing boda, and that's what I've been doing to get my tuition. But I cannot say that the situation is very good at all, because when you ask people who were in the industry before of boda, they will tell you that actually we used to make money out of this industry.
Wampisa bubi nnyo, baanoonya nga ky'oliisa n'abaana nga tokiina, temukola. Okugenda mu katale oba ofuneyo obuntuntu busa kadaala kizibu, entambula teriiwo, n'obwobuleeta ababugula tobalaba, katiako gamba byonna bizibu.
However, when you look at the bigger picture, what is worrying, that from June, when we've been partly open, the price of fuel, petrol, has increased by almost 1,000 or more. So what this means, that by next year, everything is going to be expensive, from products to services. So I think what the government has to do is to provide a recovery plan for manufacturers, service providers, and schools. I think then, deep down, as traders, things will get better again.
The first day there was a lockdown was announced and schools were closed, I wrote on my wall that this is the time to start planning for the effects of the measures being taken, because we are going to go into depression. Now, you lock down this, you want this guy, this person, you have locked down the economy, you have sent the children back to school, back home. Now, the parents are not working, they're not earning. Now, you have brought them back, they have just paid school fees, and you have not put in place a system to help mitigate the challenge you yourselves, based on your now pronouncements, have caused them. The problems you have just caused. You may say it was all over the world, but elsewhere they put in place measures to mitigate the effects of the measures taken. For example, I was talking to a young lady from Canada. She's Senegalese but lives in Canada. She said they were taken care of. They were sent money to be able to manage. And then she said her job was, she retained her job, so she was good. But here, you send me home, you send my child back to me, I have already paid school fees, now you want me to take care of this child. I look at this child looks at me, and then they are growing. By the every year, you add on your body, the body changes. I really pity people who have children who are teenagers. Managing a teenager in an environment which is not controlled is a serious problem, especially if these people have grown up in schools, especially those who are in boarding schools. Those who are in day schools, it's not so much of a hassle, because they are used to being with them all the time, in the limited space. But having a child you have for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you don't have the money to keep them busy.
It is difficult to have a person who is an adult and is not going to school. I understand, even for the young children, they have resorted to going to videos, watching TV, staying on their phones, and I believe this has been a very big setback for our children. I wish schools could open right away, because other countries have opened. For example, I happen to be in Tanzania, a part called Mwanza. People are doing their business day by day. They are open.
If you have teenagers, make sure you engage them and you occupy them. And can government come up with programs on sponsor programs on radio and national television to engage the young people in constructive programs? Give them entertainment, which is also educational and motivational. Once you do that, and they must pay for it, they must pay for this airtime, not putting the burden on the owner of the media house. No, the government must pay, because we pay taxes. That taxes should be used should be invested in coming out with programs, especially cultural programs, which will be used to educate and mold and groom the young people.
Lockdown is not an answer to what is going on. It's not going to heal anybody. The only thing is to teach people on how to stay away from COVID, because if COVID stays for 10 years, how will our children be? Because I can see a setback in the life of my son. He's asking a lot, he's up and down, what next, how can I get a job, what do I do? He would be in school today, and right now I can, because I was moving today and I saw a young boy, even the language he's using, he's selling, I think, face masks, but the language is using adult language, because he has been on the streets so early. So I would expect schools to open as early as yesterday, because other countries are moving on.
In what state are those schools? Have they been inspected? Look, take an example of the private schools, whereby they depend on the income of school fees and they're for servicing loans. How have they been managing to maintain the facilities? So if you want these people to come back, places which were closed because they could not afford to probably take care of it, now you bring in these children, most of the things are broken down. Now we may have another epidemic in terms of cholera, dysentery, you wait, watch the space, because they did not support the schools to prepare to welcome. You should have given them soft loans, 2% interest.
Five different people almost the similar challenges, but what also came out clearly is just how important a teacher is to you, to your child, a parent themselves really coming through and saying, do you know how hard it is being with your teenage child at home in an environment that is not fully controlled. So we've gotten a perspective from, say, tourism, from the education sector, and of course for those that are in business. And we want to call upon those that are watching us this afternoon. Do send us your thoughts on how you feel the economy has treated you, really, in terms of your children being at home, not going to school, but also in business. How has it been going for you? Tourism sector, we did see that the tourists were not coming through. What are the different things that you had to incorporate in your business to keep it going? We can also all agree that where there is an emerging challenge, there is actually an emerging opportunity. So we are seeing a number of people trying to get online, you know, to sell their products. So ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to deliberate under the theme, securing socio-economic transformation amidst COVID-19, we're looking at the strategies to accelerate both recovery and growth. At this very moment, do allow me invite my very good friend, Dr. Fred Muhumza. I know you're going to have a great panel of experts to talk about the different sectors, financial services sector. We also talk about education sector recovery. But a gentleman did mention, are we really, should we be talking about recovery? Because we're in a coma, economic coma. For someone to recover, they must have suffered something, but this is something that shocked us. We'll also be talking about the recovery of the tourism sector, the impact of COVID on global supply chain, the manufacturing sector, and of course the agriculture sector. So thank you so much. I'll hand over to you, Dr. Fred Muhumza.
Thank you, Sandra, and good afternoon, everybody. I don't know when the evening starts or ends. As Sandra licked my attire today, I decided to put on the way I used to put on in Senior 3. That's way back in the mid-80s, a white shirt and a khaki short trousers. The official uniform was a pair of shorts. But there was a small school next to us which was putting on trousers. So we said we are the big school, we must put on trousers. We went on strike for that. And they pushed us back to shorts. But my teacher agreed with me because I scored 92% in his mathematics examination. He said, you are the only man in this class, you have authorized you to put on trousers. After all, they are khaki trousers, you can fold them if they need them to be shorts. So I went back in 1985 and decided to really harmonize with the children who are going back soon. Let me put on my uniform of Senior 3. That was reason number one. Reason number two is really to plead to the education system. Let's have compromises as these children come back. Uniform is a necessary but not sufficient condition. Let the parents do what they can. As long as those children are dressed, let's agree they start to study. So uniform, please go slow. Soap, they need it. I don't want to tell you what we used to do during our days. Bathing was not mandatory. Leave alone using soap. But let's find compromises. The schools must open. There must be beans, there must be posho, and the conversation has really been largely on schools and the banks. But remember, most of these schools survive on posho and beans delivered from Kisenyi or any other food dealer who also delivers on credit and had just delivered food. That conversation is also packed out there. But whichever conversation we have with the banks is going to be resolved by the parents. Will they pay the fees, which eventually will help to settle the loan? So this conversation is really broad, and thank you very much, NTV, for finding those voices. Some of them even believing we are not in a recovery, we are still in a coma. Being in a coma is a positive thing, because quite often comas are handled in hospitals. So it means you're already in a hospital facility being handled and you haven't died. So you're on road to recover. That's already some positivity, but that is the broad span of things. I have a panel of individuals that I'm going to invite here. They will speak from these chairs. I will give each one of them maybe 5 or 10 minutes to have an open check. These are seasoned people in their own spaces. So I really do not want to even give them terms of reference, as they call them. I want them to come and speak for their first 5 minutes, a blank check of a few guided things really on what was it before COVID. There were some good things and there were some bad things. And then COVID came. Some bad things became worse, some good things became bad, but also some good remained, and maybe some new good came in. We don't want to be only on the negative side. In light of that, how do we recover? PSST wants to recover his economy to at least where it was before COVID. He has said we lost 3 percentage points during that COVID period. We want to recover that 3. And the voices here have actually put it in 2 contexts. What are those 3 percentage points? I like the lady in the saloon. Before, I used to get 15 to 20 customers. Now, 2 at times, none. So the 3% is real. It's real. This person puts it in figures. So how do we make sure this lady gets back her 15 customers so that she can pay the school fees? That's the story, and we want to have a conversation on this. To help us go through the conversation, financial services sector, you have always been in the limelight because money is the blood of the economy. Matthias Katamba, MD, DFCU Bank. Please come and take the floor. You can welcome him. He has honored us, a managing director of a bank, to leave his desk. You have no idea what is happening there. He certainly has to compensate deeper into the night or had to go an overnight to do that. You're welcome, sir. Education sector. It has to be a professor. Sam Sejaka. Bordernomics or border economy, whatever it is, he writes very nice things. He has really the language that brings it out the way I cannot. So I can't compete with him in that space. But he's going to tell us about the education sector. They will open, but will they open? As I've said, where are the teachers? What's the plight of the teachers? I want to believe the moment the teachers come, they are going to ask for an advance so that they can buy new shoes, new clothes, set a few things. The parents will also be bringing more of cheats than notes. Recovery of the tourism sector. Ochieng, Deputy ED at UTB. We couldn't get a Jarova, but we still go to UTB. She's hunting for tourists, but ably represented through Ochieng, Bradford. We have had the logistics chains. Many of us know that the logistics were allowed to continue. We saw cargo planes. We saw pictures of passenger planes converted into cargo. And many of them envied why wasn't I not in the logistics sector? Because at least for it is running. Well, I'm told it wasn't as easy. Abubeka Mayanja, why don't you come and prepare to tell us what happened to the logistics sector? The eggs came through. The trains, did they continue to roll? Are the ships still on the seas? What happened in that space? It can only be, one panelist will be speaking from the floor later, and I will introduce him at that point. It can only be Honorable Mrs. Victoria Sektoreko to say the rest. These ones have things to speak to. Just come in and say the rest. She has the edge, the experience. She's been in cabinet. She's been in financing. She's been in agriculture. She's been in the mothering, grandmothering. The rest belongs to her. Welcome. Let me begin really with the financial sector. And I'm going to juggle around, but I want to begin with, you can speak from here, you can speak from anywhere you want to. It's available. You sit a lot in the bank so you can actually stand. Now, the schoolboy of 1985, senior 3, can take his seat.
So thank you very much, Fred. It is actually true that I have been seated the whole day. And so I just thought I would take the opportunity to stretch a little bit. First of all, I would like to thank NTV for organizing this summit once again. But at the same time, I would like to thank the PSST for that excellent delivery. Just a moment earlier, I don't know if it's acceptable to remove the mask. It's okay, because it's a bit complex to breathe and speak. It's a skill that one has to build, like the PSST there. So, but listening to the snippets that we had from the business people on the clips that we are playing, my mind was really triggered. I had come to speak about several things. We have a lot of things to speak about from the banks, because somehow it's been misunderstood when you speak to many businesses. They talk about government, they talk about what businesses are going through, and then it's almost assumed that banks are immune. But they're also private sector businesses like all. So I had come with a whole list of things, but then I realized, listening to the business people there, that really the things that one needs to talk about are different sorts of things, a different conversation. So I'll talk very briefly about what risks arise to businesses in this period, especially going into a recovery, what the government did, its impact is on your business. The PSST went into it a little bit. What will that mean for you as a business person? I'll speak a little bit about those moratoriums and what they mean for you. And then, you know, if COVID sticks around a bit longer, maybe a year or two, what should you be thinking about as a business person? You know, and a little bit about what vulnerabilities do we see in businesses at this time. So really thinking about it and coming straight to the beginning of it, what risks do businesses face in this time? The risks existed before, they exist now, they will exist during the recovery. But something has happened. There was a clog in the pipe. If you were running a small hotel, you shut it down, and you know, you send some people home. Reopening will not be the same. Or if it was a school, because you have different challenges on the people side, you have to think about how you're going to recruit. The ones that you sent home, are they still available to come back to work? If you're going to get new ones, with the school churning out new teachers, etc., the complications are abound. You also have to think about, you know, the whole supply chain and how it's going to restart again. So, for instance, if you had a supplier of maize or grain, are they still in business? If they do, will they still be able to supply to you the same kind of stocks, amount, and quality that they were able to in the past? You need to be sourcing a new one, etc. So that stress will also be there as the engine starts. And if you are 10, 15, 20 schools in the same place, in the same region, and you are all going to the same one supplier and they are not available anymore, what's the option, etc. There will be risks associated with how you operate and how you operated before. You had there the PSST speak very deeply about what government is looking at in the priorities. And one of them is digitization. Are you fit for purpose? For instance, are you going to be able to cope with the new realities, and are you going to be able to put the investment in place? And if you're going to, do you have the capacity and the manpower to be able to run with new systems that are automated? The same thing you have to think about. If you think about your business, what has happened, your capital is probably eroded over the last 2 years. If you have investors, what are the expectations? You need to manage them. If you're going to be raising new capital, where is it going to come from, you know, especially in a time like this? So really the risks will range, and one of the speakers here from the small businesses spoke of how liquidity risks were addressed in some of the countries. deferred tax, financial support in repayment, temporary support for wages and that sort of thing. Of course, that hasn't happened here. We don't have the resource envelope to do that. But then you have to think about how are you going to deal with that business, which, like the promoter, runs from hand to mouth. That's really the challenge, because there are no buffers. And if you're going to restart, maybe there was some liquidity that was existing in the environment before when you were running your business in the past, but that's all depleted. So you're pretty much starting from zero. Government debt and its implication to you as a business, there are two primary things. One, it will increase your borrowing rate. We always talk about this. The 15-year government, the 15-year bond now at 16% and above really tells you a benchmark of where you're going to be looking to start from. So we will not go there, but you are borrowing, you will be crowded out, because government also, with that 3.7 trillion supplementary, is going to be looking from the domestic markets. So as you're reopening your business, they are competing with you. Well, we can talk about banks, but that's another thing. That is where it all starts from. But the other thing, and again the PSSC talked about it, the tax base is small. When they don't come in the market to crowd you out, they'll come back to you, the same business, to ask that you comply. And he spoke about it. Compliance is going to be one of the key things. So compliance, compliance, compliance. Try to do as much as you can to comply, so that when the taxman comes, you're in a better position to be able, to carry on. The other thing is get into associations. I think that if you are a business and you're not in an association, try to find an association. There's greater bargaining power in associations, and then get involved so that you get your association to be active in negotiations, even in engagement on matters that will affect you very directly, like taxation. The moratoriums that were given, the compliance accommodations to banks, have helped to keep the liquidity in businesses to be running over the period that they have. And even if they came to an end in September, there are additional extensions for sectors like education. But the reality is that it does not really solve the problem. It helps businesses to remain going and to have room in that period, but it masks the underlying issues. At the end of the day, you have a debt. The debt is growing. It can reach a time where it is unsustainable. The collateral positions that you hold, become smaller than the debt itself, etc. But also, it really also does mask the underlying weaknesses in those businesses themselves, because during that period, some businesses will go down, without during a moratorium, you will not know whether it has gone down or not until the period ends. But there's also a moral hazard, even for banks to think beyond the moratoriums, because the culture of repayment can get weakened, right? If you've been running a business and you borrow and every month I have to pay, and then for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 months, you really don't have to pay. And then someone says, start paying again, say, hey, what's happened to this town? I've had a year where I could live with a debt without paying. So there's a moral issue there to overcome. So COVID-19, should it stick around for another year? I think we all need to learn to live on less, to be more prudent, more efficient. We need to look at our business models, make our businesses a bit more resilient. We need to look at the underlying vulnerabilities in our businesses. It doesn't matter the size, but things like governance, how much we invest in automation and technology are important. What we put in place to make sure that we look after, and develop people is crucial, but also planning for business continuity is something that we've all learned during this period. So very briefly, capital requirements for banks are going to be increased. What does that mean for you? It's a good thing, pretty much. You'll have stronger banks. You'll have ability to take larger facilities because of the single obliga, etc. But also you'll have banks that can withstand the sort of shocks that this environment creates in a little bit of a better way. So very briefly, speaking about the impact, maybe very briefly, that this has on our sector in particular. Recently, I attended a party for one company. You won't believe what the party was. It was a back-to-office party, right? It's a very sophisticated company, and when COVID came, they all went home, right? And they bought all these laptops and all sorts of things in jump boxes and what have you. And they say, we are compliant to the future. We are set for the new normal. Everybody will work from home, right? And so they closed the offices. The company is near me. So recently I was invited for a party. I said, what's the party about? A back-to-office party, right? So people have been called to come back to the office because the new normal is not very different from the old normal. But there are certain positives out of this period. The investment in technology has gone up generally, but there are some negatives that have happened. Cyber security risks are on a higher rise because of people working more with gadgets from home and all over the place. So the cost of managing that is much higher than it was before. But also the fact that banks are part of the economy. They are key members of the private sector. All those small businesses that you have seen, apart from the owners' funds, in many ways will get support from banks. So if they are affected, they are affected. So the ultimate effect of the pandemic on the banking system is the effect on businesses, right? Because that effect, that impact on businesses crystallizes in the balance sheets of banks. So let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, really, for bringing it home. People usually say, why can't banks forgive us? We forget that the banks are actually lending other people's money, and those people can't forgive them. But every time a bank says it has a non-performing asset, it is your loan which is the asset that is not performing. And I think that's what is really reflecting, that when those businesses don't perform, it triggers back this side. So we are in this together. As the saying has been, COVID anywhere is COVID everywhere. So nobody really has had the best of it all, and we need to be recovering together. And I like the message from the PSST, especially on their side. Talking about government borrowing from the banks, I was engaging a conversation, listening into the conversation on how America has been hit by a 7% inflation rate. Now, America hasn't experienced this. And they are already proposing to increase interest rates. Now, when they do, all the money will run to America, because people will go for these good interest rates in the US. So not only is the competition local between government and you and us, it is also going to be global. And Asia is also saying the day America raises rates, we'll also raise our rates. So even the little money that was trickling into Uganda, we are going to begin competing with the giants raising their heads, to raise interest rates and attract those monies. So it's going to be a little bit more complex. So the key messages that the PSST has given us, the policies Uganda is trying to adopt, are going to confront the global policies as well. And so how is the recovery going to be managed? And one of these that everybody has been looking forward to is the recovery of schools. I was just reading here, the school where my son goes has just sent me 200 pages of notes that I need to print that the child must go back with. Samuel, is that what you're doing to us? Or is that what they are doing to you? What is this thing called the reopening of education sector and related institutions?
Can I spray? Then I can take off my mask. Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. PSST, I am really honored to find you in this context. Before COVID happened, I was your senior and your boss. COVID happened. I'm still your senior, but you're my boss. But it is a good change. So may I take this opportunity to congratulate you and wish you the best. Because of time, I will just say that all protocol observed and get on with the question of the day. First of all, thank you for your presentation. And you presented very, very, very important and critical programs that we need to address. We've always had good programs, but I guess the issue has always been our will to address our issues because of vested interests. But as you go back, one of the missing reforms I did not hear you talk about, and you and I are on a chat group where this problem has been discussed for a whole week. It never happens. That's the issue of the interns. If you do not reform the reward system in the public sector, a lot of what you're saying will not happen. It is inequitable, it is skewed, and it encourages rent seeking. I am being bold, but I must speak the truth to you, that if we do not address this problem, all the other problems will remain. But that is your docket now, so you deal with it. Mine remains education, and as you said rightly, we've been closed for 2 years. That is a world record. It is not an enviable world record, but that is what we chose, and we have to accept. The education sector is probably the most critical sector in any economy. If you look around the world, here you use the word education, but for us we talk about human capital. And if you look around the world, it is human capital that differentiates developed nations from underdeveloped nations. So we have a very big problem. At the time of closure, we had about 500,000, and these are rounded figures. We had about 500,000 students in pre-primary. We had about 8 million in primary schools. We had about 1.5 million in secondary schools. And Dr. Muhumuza, you have always been asking, between the 8 million and the 1.5, where do the rest disappear? We have about 150,000 in tertiary institutions and about 250 in institutions. So this is the size, the scale of what we closed. When we closed, there are also other things that we have not talked about, which I think are very important. In the 70s, we had a gentleman who was our president, was called Idi Amin, and it caused so much chaos. So many of the people who worked in the education sector went into exile. Where did they run? They ran to Kenya and to Tanzania. So Kenya overtook us in terms of the standards of education in the 70s. This is a situation which over the 30 years we had again managed to reverse, and we had overtaken these countries in the region, because you could see that students were coming back to Uganda at all levels of education. What is going to happen? Because Uganda had now identified itself as an education hub. So the 2-year closure has a wider impact. It may have micro impacts at the family level, which we're talking about, but has a wider, more significant impact. So when we closed, we had what we called pre-closure challenges. The sector is underfunded generally. It has poor management structures. Because of our fertility rates, we had a large number of students, and the sector is also characterized by absence of teachers, especially in remote areas. So the students, whereas we had increased the numbers, we are generally not getting enough, a requisite level of instruction. But that also is nuanced, because you have to look at the haves and the have-nots. So there are certain aspects of education system that have become very sophisticated and a state of the art. But at the bottom of the pyramid, we remain with a very big problem. So we then move into closure. And when we move into closure, one of the things that happens as we have the changes taking place is now the digital divide becomes very, very emphasized. I know there were lots of debates in government about buying radios, about programs on TV and so forth. I don't know to what extent these have worked. I know for a fact that for the poor, these things have not worked. So the digital divide has been most accentuated in terms of the haves and have-nots. Very many families, middle-class families, have voted with their feet. They have taken their children to Kenya, they have taken their children to Tanzania, and they have taken their children to international schools, to the extent that some schools added the word international to their names so that they could open. But also, again, looking at the people at the bottom, there has been increased gender-based violence. Take a moment and think of the girl child who was 12 years old, just beginning puberty, and is in the village. What has happened? So, unfortunately, we estimate, and PSST, these are the things you really have to look at. How are we going to manage them? You have nearly 500,000 girls who are not going to return to school. Either they have been married off, or they have become pregnant and they're not going to be allowed back, given our Judeo-Christian hypocrisy. This is really serious. So what will happen to the girl child? As I have said, we were an education hub, so there's a lot of damage to the ecosystem. And if you want to understand that damage, you must think in terms of the stakeholders. Because of time, I cannot make a full analysis, but very briefly, I've identified parents, I've identified students, I've identified teachers, I've identified proprietors of schools, I've identified financial institutions which lent us money, I've identified suppliers of goods and services, and of course the government. Okay? Because if the suppliers of goods and services were still in business, then government would collect some revenue. If the schools were still open, I don't think many of the loans you have given out to us would become delinquent. But this is a situation. Surprisingly, somebody has told me, and I don't know, you can speak to this, Matthias, that about 47% of the loans to the education sector are still performing. I don't know how far true. But definitely, there is a big problem here. Okay. What about the proprietors? What condition are they in? I understand some schools have become bars, others have become churches, others are closed. Where are the teachers? I'm always reminded of a lady I befriended on social media, Harriet Agasiru, and I saw a picture in the newspapers, and she was roasting corn by the roadside. Now, the trick is whether she makes more money roasting corn or going back to teach in the UPE school. So, will we get these teachers back? The students, what state are they in, especially the poor ones? Of course, you've had the parents speaking. So, we are now moving to reopening. We thank God for that. But reopening does not mean business as usual, because we have an ecosystem that has not worked properly for the last 2 years. What must we do? What should we do to get this sector going? And for me, I think that depends on the issue of stakeholders. Which stakeholder you're looking at, because each different stakeholder has a different pain point. I think for the parents, Fred has just talked about photocopying the 200 pages. But the way life works is you try to have survival of the fittest. So the parents are going to be pressured to support these schools to get back to life. Now, how do you strike a compromise? So the proprietors of the schools are kicking the can towards the parents. But the parents have also not been working. So we have a problem there. What is the state of the students? Yes, the students are being promoted, but they need remediation classes. How are we going to do that remediation? This is where I become a professor. I have more questions than answers. The proprietors, they have loans. How are they going to pay these loans? When you talk to my friend Matthias, he says this is not his money. And he has been reporting, or most of the banks have been reporting, very nice profits. Moratoriums are not waivers. So the loans have been growing. So essentially, there's a sense in which everybody is passing the buck. But when we open up and we don't, and we get back to a sense of normalcy, these loans have to be serviced. I have experienced it myself. I walked to my bank. I told them I cannot service this loan. I said, can I give you back the principal? They said, Professor, but how about the other 100 million, which is the interest? We have already booked it on our P&L. After a lot of back and forth, I was able to escape with only the principal. But how many school proprietors are going to be able to force Matthias and his friends to reverse profits which they have booked? So I think there's going to be an avalanche of non-performing loans once these loans become due. But you've also talked about that yourself and presents a moral hazard. Then the service providers who complete this cycle, in what state are they? Are they going to be able to continue? But Uganda being Uganda, I am optimistic that the system will restart. A friend of mine told me, the representative of the European Union, I bring this lightly, but I think I may share it with you, that we need to bring in some people here to do research on the resilience and capacity of Ugandans to accept nonsense. So it is food. There's a lot of food in this region. Otherwise, a lot of the things that have gone on in Uganda have not really been acceptable. They have not been science-based, and that's why the schools have been closed for 2 years. I have been able to move in the region. Kenya is booming, Tanzania is flying, and we are closed. It is like COVID spreads during the night, and during the day it is okay for us to move around. So these are very serious problems, and the PSST has spoken to the damage in the economy. But because we're a resilient country, I do hope that we're going to overcome these problems. But PSST, we will need, you've gotten some measures for SMEs. I've saw the papers today. I think you have some measures for these schools, but we are going to need more. We are going to need things like debt forgiveness for some of these banks, for some of these school proprietors. And this is something you and your bankers association have to deal with. You have to write back some of that profit. I don't know, Manzi is not here. He doesn't want to hear that. But these are realities we're going to have to deal with, that in order to restart this sector and get it running properly within the next 2 years, next 3 years, there is going to be a lot of give and take. We need to work together, we need to cooperate in order to make sure that the standard of human capital is restored. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Samuel. You have said it in black and white. I know there are no more pictures of black and white that are common for people to see. But if I showed you the picture of black and white that I took in my senior 3, remember my reference point is senior 3. That was also the year there was a change of government, the last coup. So I experienced what children are going through today. I was in senior 3, I think, for 23 weeks. I came back and was promoted automatically to senior 4. So these things are not new. They are not new. I promoted myself because there was nothing to do. So we just went straight to senior 4, but that was in April, because in between there, Museveni had done some things, both to the school and to the government. So people who left senior 3 in July came in April next year to senior 4. And of course, as boys, we had a strike. We were sent back home. We came back in September and sat the exams, and here we are. So take courage, my friends. Schools are opening. Your lives are still out there. You will manage and succeed. It's not going to be easy, but it is possible. These are resilient Ugandans. I like the young boy. Tuition was not coming through. He didn't look for tuition. He said, guys, mobilize for me a border. Agility and really looking forward to different options is going to be the answer. Because even as the president opens, a lot is open already, by the way. I see people at night, traffic jams at midnight. I even wonder what we are opening, apart from a little bit of education institutions. This economy has been open. And who is better shaped to tell it to all of us than the one I said will say the rest? Honorable Victoria Secretoleko. Why don't you come and say it in black and white, from the mother, the grandmother, the politician, the citizens? You just have that blank check of 10 minutes to tell it to us. What do we do?
Thank you, Fred. 10 minutes. I don't know where to start. PSST, all of you distinguished Ugandans and those of you online. Maybe I'll first comment on what the PSST did not say. You know, at a time like this, when Mr. PSST, you make a speech and you don't mention the word teacher, just like my friend Sam has said, you don't mention anything to do with hospitals, you know, the doctors, the interns. You somehow forget to mention the Salaries Commission. And of course, I appreciate when you appreciate that the reason Uganda did not go into depression is because of coffee. So because agriculture is doing relatively well, those of you who have known me to talk about agribusiness and agriculture will be disappointed today because I'm going to talk about something else. What do I want to talk about? Maybe before I tell you what I want to talk about, I'll comment on the digital divide, because this is really hitting home. I have a granddaughter who really studied very well, and on her own volition made it to Gayaza High School. Of course, Gayaza has been closed, but it is one of those elite schools, and they have continued. They never closed, really. So when Fred says, what are we opening? Gayaza never closed. They continued digitally. So one day I called my son-in-law to ask how, actually I got a nameless message, which I suspect my granddaughter instigated to have sent to me, to ask what is happening to your granddaughter. We don't see her in class. So I called my son-in-law, and he said, oh, you see, I print the notes for her. So I asked her, and how do you give those notes, her homework to the teacher? Until today, that was 3 months back, I have not got a reply. I'm definitely sure my granddaughter is not alone, and I'm really worried, because that is the majority of Ugandans. While we were talking about radios and TVs and phones and whatever, they are just not there, full stop. Especially for me, I will tell you the districts I come from. I come from 5 districts. My mother comes from Bujiri, so I'm very conversant with Bujiri. I'm married in Butambala. All of you are conversant with Butambala. Then I come from Jinja originally, which is supposed to be doing well, but it is stunted. Then, so when I talk, what I'm going to talk about is what I have seen and what I have experienced. So, just in case I was 20 years younger, which would have made me eligible to be a minister, and maybe I was prime minister, what would I have suggested that we do post-COVID? In my view, with the experience and the real view I have of life, the most important thing we need is human resources. I would prioritize human resources so much so that I would not even consider promoting any child who has not been in class. Where are they hurrying to? After all, even those who graduated have no jobs. So if we are lucky to keep this behind a bit, let us keep them. When I was in junior school, we used to do primary was 9 years. Then you did that major exam, then you went to secondary school. For a reason I have never thought about, it was changed to 7. And these little children don't even understand the importance of that P7. So this could have been our greatest chance to revert to 9 years. Because these children have missed the 2 years. Let the primary be 9 years. Let lower senior secondary school be 5 years. Then you do your 2 years. And you graduate when you are 24. After all, what is the hurry? So, given the importance of human resources, and given the fact that these children will soon be the presidents, the engineers, and the doctors, I don't support anything half-cooked to be graduated. So like I said, if I had the power, the first thing I would look at is the human resources. So what would I, exactly how would I do this? The most important thing is planning and budgeting properly, followed by organized implementation, which sticks to the plan. Mr. PSST, you knew we were going to comment on this, so you were saying, oh, you see, you are now going to, why can't it start like right now? Where you say that you are not going to have any more supplementary budgets. What emergency do we have now, which is requiring supplementary? Because it is interesting when you go we have had State House for the last, ever since we became independent. But State House always gets emergency. There is no new president, there is no new visitor. Who needs that supplementary? So that is what I'm talking about. So if I did my planning very well and budgeting properly and followed my plan, exactly what would I do? I would invest a lot in education, skilling, internship, and digitalization. Why? Basically because as far as I'm concerned, if you educate your human resources very well, and if you skill them, then they all go through internship. Because now that the intern doctors are the issue, everybody is looking at internship. And the other day I was reading something to do with everybody who graduates needs to do internship. But it looks like in our plan, that is not there. I remember I've got a son who did plumbing at Nakawa, and when he graduated, he had to go and do his internship. There are not many people who do plumbing, so it was easy for me to place him. But at the end of 6 months of internship, I asked him whether he thought it was worth it. And he said, I think 3/4 of what I know now, I learned through internship. He was with Cresta Tank, those people who sell tanks. So, in my view, this education, which is theoretical, which is not skilling, should be looked at again. So, knowing what I know, what would I do in order to achieve this? I think, first of all, I would look at the program and the budget and the plan as I have them, because currently we are talking about the parish model, which, once again, the PSST did not mention, so I wondered whether it was going to go the same route as Bubu, because it was not mentioned either. Now, if you look at the parish model, and you are looking at human resources, and I told you I come from several districts, so I'm going to choose 2 parishes and give you examples. I'll start with the one of Ntinda, where I stay. Honestly, with all due fairness, if any parish in Uganda is well endowed, Ntinda is well endowed. You name it, and it is available in Ntinda. Ntinda, we have everything from agriculture, agribusiness, manufacturing, tourism, construction, oil and gas, transport, roads, you name it, and we have them. That Ntinda parish has 4 big hospitals. We have got the newest technical college in the Republic of Uganda with high tech. We are right next to Kyambogo, that is the next parish when you leave our place. We are surrounded by 3 other technical colleges, one funded by Japan. We have got 2 big markets, because we have got Nakawa, which is in our neighborhood, and then we have got Ntinda Market proper, then in New Ntinda Market. We have got banks. I see Bank of Africa, I see Centenary Bank, I see Stanbic. They are all in that one parish. What haven't I mentioned? We have got schools. One of the very few schools for the deaf is found in Ntinda. So you want anything, go to Ntinda. Now, that is a parish which we are lumping together with Chabadaza Budebutambala. Really? If I was in charge of this republic and I was to revive the economy, I would take Ntinda to be my model parish. I would go there and look at everything I want to do, like I would start with the interns. I've told you we have got everything. So if I wanted to manage the medical interns, I would go to Ntinda Parish and tell them that you have got 4 hospitals. Each hospital is going to get 10 interns, and they are going to be living here. So we, the government, want to support these people. So who has got good facilities to accommodate these interns? And we would all put up our hands. I've got 2 rooms, 20 rooms, and so on and so forth. The government would come and see, give good rent to the landlord, give good accommodation to the intern, and the intern would go to school among the people whom they are going to serve. If you are talking about teacher training colleges, I've told you have got schools, including the school for the deaf. If you have these colleges, we have got construction going on. The biggest hardware shop is in Ntinda. Finally, we have got, sometime back, there was a publication, I don't know how true it was, that Ntinda drinks the most beer. So I would open, up the night economy, and before you know it, Ntinda would be blooming. So what is required from government? Really, all that you are supposed to do is govern, regulate, and tax. If you tell us all that, we, the people of Ntinda, are going to invest in everything in between. So you don't have to go borrowing from my friend here, because we shall borrow, and you said that this is an economy led by the private sector. But when you are speaking, Mr. PSST, you did not even mention the private sector. Neither have you invited us to say, now that we are going to reopen the economy, what say you? We are there and we can talk. Mr. Sejak, Professor Sejak was talking about schools and the stakeholders. I don't think there has ever been a meeting of all these stakeholders in order for them to tell us what they want. And to NTV, is there any reason why amongst all the people you interviewed, there was no teacher? Why is it that some people are permanently forgotten? Because that is where the pain is. When you go to look for a student, you look for a student who is already a man. I would have been happy if you interviewed a 12-year-old. I've got a 7-year-old granddaughter who has, by the time COVID started, she was 5, planning to go to P1. She has given me an ultimatum. She's not going to turn 7 until she has gone to school. How does one handle that? I would have loved for you to interview her. Now, I said at the beginning that if I was to manage this economy, I would prioritize education, skilling, internships, and digitalization. Oh, I have not told you about the parish, the rural parish. The rural parish I've chosen is Chavadaza, which is in Buderi, sub-county, Butambala. That is the headquarters for anybody who has taken Masaka Road, where you find in Tangawuzi, Jinja, that particular parish is the headquarters of ginger growing in Uganda. That is where Ntangawuzi Cooperative Society is found. So if I was to manage this economy, I would go to Kyabadaza and start with what they are already doing, which is ginger. I would advertise all the jobs for people to work in parishes. Why am I saying this? This business of appointing people who don't know what they are talking about should come to an end. Going back to the human resources, I would love for all of us, because we each come from a parish, I would love to see the job of Chawada's the LC2, is it the parish chief, being advertised. I could apply. I don't think I'll be disqualified because I'm from there and I have got a passion. People like Fred Muhumza, I would love for him to be the parish chief for his parish. Yeah, because then that way you'll find that if I'm in Chavadas, I already know they do ginger. So we would get a production officer who knows about ginger. We would go into value addition, we would go into transportation, proper packaging, you name it. We would be selling the best seeds of ginger to the whole of Uganda. So instead of, somebody said we need money in our pockets. Definitely we need money in our pockets. But we are not lame, we are not disabled. We don't want cash. We are not expecting anybody to give us any cash. All we want is support that which we enjoy doing. Okay, if I was to do all that, because as you can see, if you go to Chavadaza, they're already doing the Ntangawuzi. All you have to do is appoint the right people, pay the right people, and the private sector there will do their work. But where would you get the money to pay all that? In my view, the first point would be digitalization, which I've told you about. Mr. PSST, is there any reason why Cabinet still has to commute to Entebbe? They have got those laptops and iPads. Parliament, we bought them iPads. What are they doing in Parliament? Why are we seeing huge tents coming up here and there, just spreading COVID? If we digitalized this economy immediately, the first thing, for example, today, Kayunga yesterday would not have happened, in that we would not have spent so much money going to Kayunga to campaign. Even the campaigns would have been digital. So if you digitalize everything, you immediately save a lot of money, which money can go to manage those parishes. Where else would you get money? I would immediately stop Emyoga, because really the translation of the word Emyoga is talent. So how did the talent translate into some money where you have got to go into an association? Which parish has got a talent which is the same? Because talent, we are talking about a good fisherman or a good farmer. If you were to look for a parish with the same talent, maybe you could consider going to the fishing villages. But even those, when I was there, I remember I saw women, and they are very few. So I asked them, what do you do here? We cook. Most of those men don't want to cook, so we tutunda mere, we sell food. So that one, her talent is in cooking food, not in catching fish. Then there are others, their job is to make boats. Others, their job is to get the nets and then disentangle the nets. So as you can see, if a Myoga is talent, those are completely different talents. So when you start saying, because you want a Myoga, form an association. Association of what? Because we are not the same. In China, what happens is more or less what I was talking about earlier, in that if Chawadaza was the one to produce, if this was China, officially Chawadaza would be delegated to produce all the ginger used in Uganda. So when and if you are appointed as the Chawadaza chief, your job is to make sure that the whole of Uganda has ginger. Then the child from Chawadaza would be supported to go to Makerere to learn how to grow ginger. Then somebody else would go to learn how to drive vehicles so that they can drive the. So everything is built with the parish in mind. and you do not have an oversupply here or there because everything is planned. So going back to what I said, if I had the power, what would I do? Plan better, budget accordingly, stick to the plan, and in the process of doing all that, little things like corruption would disappear. How? It is very, very difficult to start stealing if and when you are really, one, you are well facilitated. Because for us when we were young, when I was in the bank for 13 years, I was not corrupt. I was given a good salary and I lived on that salary. But when you underpay people, when you, I don't know. So, back to what I would do, the most important thing is human resources. And because the most important thing is human resources, I would definitely make sure that nobody does what the police did to the doctors the other day, making them kneel in public and all that. For me, it is not, I'm not hurt because they knelt. It is what they do to our children. Because these little children, the 10-year-olds are seeing that. Now, when you are a grandmother, you are busy mentoring your grandchild. When you grow up, I want you to be a doctor. My little granddaughter insists she wants to be the police. And I'm like, why? When I ask her why, she says the police always has the gun, and even when we are with daddy, when he sees the police, he's worried. So I would like to suggest that as Uganda, we start thinking about the future, because the president said that this particular time he's securing our future. We want our future secured, but we want it to be safe. Finally, if we went digital, then there would be no need for me to say the price of internet is very high. Because everybody has got digital, I'm hoping that government can finally pick up the cost of digitalization. But all I want, Mr. Pierce, even if you don't do everything I have suggested, go digital. Stop those huge meetings, stop those huge delegations, especially when you send a team of 20 MPs to Dubai to do what? Most of what they saw could have been seen from here. That money could have rehabilitated at least one school. So, to conclude, what would I do if I was in charge? I would definitely prioritize education, skilling, internships, and digitalization. I thank you.
Don't say I didn't tell you. I told you she's going to say the rest. And she has said, thank you very much for bringing to life of if. The ifs are very, very strong things, and they speak to a lot. PSST talked about digitalization. At least you have some common ground on a number of things. You talked about prioritizing job creation. We're speaking into some common things. And national security, macroeconomics, discipline in the budget, quite a number of things that really came through, but she's brought it home. These children, what do they want to be and why? Are we speaking to the future we want them to be? Are our actions guiding them and giving them the aspirations they would want to be? It is one thing to open the school, but if this child is saying, aha, let them open the school, once I finish, this is what I want to be. That is really the conversation you want to be interested in. A child should not just go back to school, but the aspiration of why they are going to school is even more important than them just going back to that school. So we are opening the economy is already open, and a number of things are really coming through on where do we want to go and how do we want to go. Is the stimulus sufficient? This is a 148 trillion economy. How much should the stimulus be? 5% will be about 7.5 trillion. We're not even talking about a stimulus of 1 trillion. So we still really are having problems that we need to be addressing. Trying to provoke the PSST to speak some things. Tourism is one of the things the PSST mentioned that he really wants to get back. What is the situation like? It wasn't closed. It was closed, then it was opened. But are they coming through? Are they doing the tests? Some people here say they haven't seen them. Usually the tourism is related to crafts. The crafts people came in and said they have not yet seen anybody walking in. Is it open? Are we hearing ghosts? What else do we need to see besides opening the airport and doing COVID tests? Bradford. Bradford was neighboring to Manchester, so he is a city himself.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, thank you, Doctor. Yeah, my colleague, Bona PSST, really, I thank you for being with us all this time. It's quite unique that you can stay with us for this long, in spite of your busy schedule. Our development partners, EU, thank you for being with us. Yes, I know the oversight, they're always around to see that the budget is implemented well. Sebakunda, thank you. Can also see Professor Mage Kigozi. Yes, he started this, but still it's not yet completed. It's not easy. Tourism. I think, let me just remove my mask if you allow. I look at tourism as a very inclusive sector. It's a sector that really, I would think, if we were to implement the Paris model, it's one really that could really be at the epicenter. It is a sector that brings in equity, and unlike oil and gas that you get in Bunyoro, where Fred comes from, tourism, you get it everywhere. In Ikidepo, in the eastern, in the Busoga, in Buganda here, everywhere you get really some tourism. And at school, we used to say it's an invisible export, but I think it is a sector where it's very, very easy to actually, get dollars. You just do a nice tour guide, and before you realize you don't have to shift anything there, you have dollars already staying in the country. Very equitable. So if you want inclusion, inclusiveness, I think it is a sector that brings in a lot of inclusiveness. And why? The value chain is too long, right from the airport through the borders. Look at how many border posts do we have? We are close to 30-something. The people are coming in, there's transport, there's along the way, there are stopovers, people drink, people eat, and all that. Accommodation, people sleep, what to see, and all that. So again, this is a sector that really touches every point. So there are many touch points within the sector, and along the touch point, you drop something. You rest and all that. Tourism also brings happiness. You don't need to see tourists while they are away. They've never met. They're in a site and they are sharing, taking a picture. You know, these are all people who are very different. You know, they are here and there. So it brings a lot of happiness, and it's good for a country. Now, as UTB, we are marketing a product called Uganda. This is a destination, and it's not agricultural products. This is a big thing, a big product that we need to market. Now, the catch is now, it must be very attractive. This product must be very attractive, must attract people. And attraction comes with a lot of, marketing, promotion, and all that. This sector must also be very competitive. You must know that the sector that you are promoting must actually be one that really compares well with your neighbors. Yeah, it's very, very important. Now, what is this country? This country is made of so many people. Actually, the last count, we have 65 tribes in Uganda. It is the most diverse nation in the world after Papua New Guinea, Tanzania, and DR Congo. A country called Uganda. Very diverse, 65 tribes. And all these they come with food, we come with what to see, cultures, they come with all this and all that. And yet we are very harmonious. We live in happiness. You saw a student who said he was dropping out of school and then he needed to think and so that he could stay at school. Uganda, again, is the most entrepreneurial country in the world. The most. And it has been like that for the last, I think, since 2014, followed by Thailand. So I think the ground is well laid. It's now upon us, the policy makers, the actors, just to make sure that we bring this home. It's a country also that is very accommodating. In 2019, BBC did a study of expatriates, and in the countries where they are based, they're asking them to compare, Ugandans with, not only Ugandans, I mean like 113 countries. And Uganda came top as the country that is very, very accommodative. So again, we have a product that really we need to see how to market and all that. But COVID, of course, came and did a lot of disruptions. And the beauty probably that I would have said is like we all came to ground zero. Everything came to a standstill, meaning that there was a default. Now, it was now upon us, the policymakers, the practitioners, the Ugandans, to say, yes, how do we get out of the pact and start running? So I think we had the possibility, again, really to, that would then depend on the policies that we had, how we would actually respond. So, well, that is the thank you we would give to COVID. The only problem now, if we did not act, then definitely we would then stay down forever. Now, before COVID, we have been growing at an increasing rate. 2009, we had like about 800,000 visitors coming into Uganda, 2009. By 2019, before the onset of COVID, we were over 1.5 million visitors. So you can see almost doubled, just in a space of 10 years. And annually, we would be having close to $115 million. Not annually, yes, annually. Sorry, monthly. Monthly, we have about $150 million every month. Those are the earnings we'll be getting from tourists. December like this, that was a peak before COVID. We are looking at $140 million. December alone, we would get $140 million. So again, that tells you really that prior to COVID, I think we were steady, we were doing well. And where were these visitors coming from? Yes, 70% of our visitors were coming from the continent, Africa definitely. And this was before the COVID. I think it was Rwanda leading, followed by Kenya. Then we had Tanzania, then we had DR Congo, then like that. But outside of the continent, North America was leading, championed by US, where we had like almost close to 70,000 visitors. Then followed by the UK, 36, India, 36,000, like that. Then the Benelux countries and all that. So again, and consistently we would get these numbers on average. Of course, when COVID came, then we had the disruptions, and before you realize, everything came to a standstill. So from US dollars 1.6 billion that we used to get annually, when we did a study by end of 2020, this came down to $500 million. $500 million, so it dropped completely. And we hope increasingly this should then be going up as we try to become resilient, and also as we try to cope. So visitation to maybe like some of our sites in the national parks, we used to have over 310,000 annually. This one also came down by almost 69%. It dropped. And the accommodation, like occupancy rates, before COVID, it was about 58 point something, call it 60. When COVID came, this came to 5%. 5. It came down completely, like almost the facilities were empty. And I think it goes down. You remember at a point where you had fish was going for 5,000, a kilo of, all this and all. Because, I mean, the hotels were not buying fish. The hotels were not buying fish. Food prices came down just because I think the demand was also very low. So I think that tells you again the value chain impact of tourism in the economy. Now, that said, as we talk now, there's some bit of recovery. There's a bit of recovery now. Post government came and responded. Even at our level at UTB, we tried to respond. We tried to challenge Ugandans to take on the PAL. If you heard of the promotion that we had, take on the PAL. We worked with the partner institutions to reduce fees and all that. And somehow, somewhere, I think the local, what we call the domestic visitors or the travelers started, we challenged them. But of course, people had also stayed locked down a bit, and everybody was ready to travel. So we saw that definitely, if we are to recover fast enough, then the answer is actually on domestic tourism. Of course, you had the experience of people won't touch dollars. The greenback is quite good. They don't give discount, as they said. But that said, our currency is freely convertible. You can change it to dollars if you want. But I think they said sometimes before you get it, people try to haggle and then the discount. But again, really, let's travel domestically. That is the only way to bring sustainable tourism in the country. Now, I talked about the product being attractive and competitive. I think now this brings us now to the challenges, how we see the sector now. In terms of competitiveness, we are not doing well at all. If you look at some of the aspects Honorable brought, the professor brought, the digital divide. How do we leverage ICT in tourism? The study that was done before when the Covid 2019, we were not comparing well. Out of 140 comparators that were done, we ranked 124. So out of 140 countries, we were 124. If you looked at hygiene and health, out of again 140, we were 136. So which means we are just better than only 4 countries. Meaning that even the water before you, you should really take care to pick it and drink. It means it's not very safe. Meaning that, a lot of things really. Because when you talk of safety and health, it means there are many things that are embedded in that. So we didn't do well in terms of competitiveness. In terms of tourism infrastructure, we're 119 out of 140. We also didn't do well there. Well, in terms of price, I think we are trying out of 140, we're 80 out of 140. We're trying there a bit. So you could see really, for us to come back, some of these indices, there are about 14 of them, we need really to work on them and make sure that the country is competitive and attractive. If you look at the compositions of our visitors, I talked about 80% of our visitors coming from the continent. Normally, we do, there are 3 segments. We look at visitors, we call them leisure. These are people who have the real hardcore dollars. People who come from outside the continent. We have the business visitors. These are people who come for conferences and all that. Then we have a segment of those visiting friends and families. The last study, we were not comparing well with Tanzania and Kenya. Tanzania, the composition of leisure visitors is up to 69%. Up to 69, meaning that they had more visitors coming from outside the continent, the US, Canada, those outside the continent. Kenya at 63, and for Uganda, we're 20.1 to be exact. 20.1, meaning that most of our visitors are from the continent, and which is okay in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of risk, it can be very disruptive. If you recall what happened between us and Rwanda, as I talk now, Rwanda was leading by 2019. Over the last 12 months, they were almost now coming to number 14, 15, like that. Very few visitors would cross over from Rwanda to here. So you have that kind of risk and shock. So we need to diversify to make sure that we have more and more of leisure visitors, so that we have the real dollars coming to the country. That is one. The other challenge that we are also seeing is in terms of how do I call it, supports, money for promotion. Yes, if you see again in relative terms, the proportion of budget that goes to marketing. For Uganda, we are putting 0.06. And then if you compare with the front runners, Kenya, Mauritius, and maybe South Africa, Kenya puts 0.9, South Africa puts 0.49, so is Mauritius. So meaning that for us to compete, the minimum that we'll be looking at would actually also 0.5. That 0.5 will translate almost to around 200 billion annually. But you can guess how much we get now. We are putting about 11 billion. So you can actually see the gap. So we need to compete. There's no shortcut to this. We need to compete, and we need to compete, we need to compete. And the other thing, of course, that we need to do well is really to make our destination very, very attractive. But as I get out, I must say that we are on the path of recovery. We are recovering now, and the occupancy rate has grown from under 5%. As we talk now, it is at 31%, and we want to go back to the pre-COVID levels where we were at 58%. If we could do better, then I think that would make us really, move further. So I think this is where I can stop for now, but I want to thank all of you. But maybe now the last as I go out, please let's take on the PAL. Let's visit our country. I want to challenge PSST that yes, let's encourage public servants, civil servants to make sure that really they take on the PAL. The PAL is good. We are working on a destination brand, a brand that eventually will really make Uganda shine among the competitors. Thank you so much.
Samples of the economy and how they were affected and what it would take to recover them. But of course, these things are integrated. Domestic tourism is speaking on salaries as well. If we can't pay them well, they may not tour. But it's also speaking on the integrated way of looking at things, program-based approaches. The tourist who begins on a Unira road ends up on a district road. So if the district and community road has not been done, this man, that will be his memory about Uganda, and it won't be a nice picture. We're talking about logistics, not easy to manage them. What happened to them? Abu Baker. You have some 10 minutes. Let's stick to 10 minutes, because I want also to hear from manufacturers. I don't want to be accused that we came here and we talked and manufacturers said nothing. They won't like us. Even me, I won't like myself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhumuza. It's always humbling to come to speak after him, because he's one of the few financial economists that we have. The PSST and your team, Mr. Mukunda, Mr. Molo, and Mr. Katamba, Professor Sejaka, Professor Chigozi, and Dr. Sechtoreko. These are all key stakeholders. So one of the key things of coming out of a crisis is to talk to each other. So we would like to thank you, sir, for sponsoring the Economic Summit. And it may sound like a joke, but I'd like to put some economics back in the summit, considering where I come from. So the best example to understand the importance of transport and logistics is to recognize what Adam Smith said, a famous economist in 17th century, that you have two economies. You have this urban economy, but you also have the rural economy that depend on each other. And what connects both of them is transport and logistics. So what ends up happening is that the rural economy produces raw materials that end up in factories, they are processed, and then they get back finished products. So in terms of recovery, it's very important to consider the transport and logistics sector. And specifically, the question I'm to answer is how COVID has disrupted the global and logistical supply chain in relation to local households. Now, I will go by department. We have road freight. Road transport was impacted regionally and locally. If you noticed, when the cars were not moving, there's a lot of output that comes out of the farm that is bought by people who are moving on the road from the rural areas to the city. And some of that output was lost forever. So in terms of resilience, and why do I say it was lost forever? Because it's perishable. If somebody's mangoes are ready and they are ripe, and they come to the market and the cars are not moving, there was a section of time when the local logistical supply chain broke down, and it had an immediate direct impact on the value of the savings of rural households as well as their livelihoods. And going to the regional one, we had a challenge that the control measures were quite strict on truck drivers who are coming from Mombasa, which carries more than 90% of our trade. So instead of turning around a shipment from Mombasa to Kampala in 5 days, we use now to do it in 30 days. Now the knock-on effect of that is that, if I'm to use an example of a pharmaceutical factory, they may need about 11 elements to produce the drug that you need. And if one gets stuck on the road, the factory cannot function. And if the factory cannot function, then there is no output. And if there's no output, then there's no labor, both formal and informal labor, because you know there are people who lift the goods when they are done. Then it also impacts the local transporter who will take the lower bulk. So the impact was quite huge in 2020. And I don't want to go into financials, but it was quite significant. But it's safe to say that we've seen some recovery. We've turned it around, and the transportation in the region has normalized to an extent. Then for ocean freight, I may just use an example that to ship from China to Uganda was around $2,000. Now it's about $10,000 to $12,000. The impact of that is that everything that we import becomes expensive. This is all the way from capital machines, capital machinery to raw materials. And on top of that, the other challenge we've been having is containers are stuck in different places because of the frequency. The lack of frequency in ocean freight created a buildup of shipping containers in certain areas, and then they were not where they were needed. Again, it brings me back to the same thing, that we ended up with manufacturers not getting the raw materials they needed, so they cannot produce. And that knock-on effect goes into the public sector as well, because if they're not producing, then there's no VAT, there's no excise duty. And so you could say that between 2020 and 2021, as far as the ocean freight situation is concerned, is still a challenge, which is ongoing. Generally, you could expect that either these costs will be absorbed or there will be higher inflation. So you could plan for that well in advance. In terms of air transport, the crisis was that we lost frequency of visiting aircraft. And it's not a crisis until you're handling fresh produce. If you're familiar with Uganda's export profile, apart from coffee, most of it goes through the airport. We handle it through the airport. And when you don't have the global airlines coming, sometimes it's a serious challenge because they are perishables. So during the height of the crisis, there were material losses, even in terms of demand from the global market for things like flowers. Then in that whole process, you also have the clearance, customs clearance, the interaction with authorities like Uganda Bureau of Standards, Uganda Revenue Authority, who were forced to digitize very fast. And that digitization was not as smooth, and so sometimes we had those challenges, but they are constantly being addressed. So the issue of digitalization, without waiting until the end, I can easily say that we can leverage technology to create efficiency, and we've done that. because unlike most sectors, for us, instead, we didn't have the opportunity to cry, because as soon as the globe came up with a solution of vaccines, everybody was knocking on the door of us, logistical and transport companies. They're saying, okay, we need to get these vaccines to where they are. And the reason why that was the case is because there are very few countries that had the capacity to produce the vaccines. And then when you're already dealing with a capacity problem in terms of air freight, we now had to make a choice, and we had to create competences as a group, from our supply chain to express, to just make sure vaccines get where they get. And the knock-on effect of that was that some of the goods we had to remove them and say, we are not going to ship this now, we need to ship PPEs. And some of all the infrastructure of the group was now deployed to deal with the resilience. And that is the slide I'm showing you. As in, we realized that we had to bring our cold chain expertise, which we normally use for vegetables or fresh produce, to actually now deal with the pandemic. Now, in terms of more impacts, on the export side, we had the challenge of low frequency of inbound shipments, and that means that at some point we lacked capacity even to pack coffee. You know, you have the coffees ready, but you don't have an empty container. So how did we respond as a company? During the lockdown, we got a build-up of inventory in our warehouses from separate SMEs. And every time you try to talk to them, because they can't pay you, they're not selling, they tell you our shops are closed. And e-commerce, because it's not all a sad story, there are always winners, even when things are bad. So our e-commerce division was the fastest growing everywhere in the world, because people were sitting at home and ordering. So what we did was to get very practical and respond and introduce that here in Africa. I think we had an interaction with SMEs, introduced our e-commerce platform, and as a result of that, I think Uganda got its first shipment to Japan of roasted coffee. So through our Go Trade program, we became active participants in building resilience and finding a solution to the problem. And what we've done is to interact directly with businesses and SMEs that are on the export value chain, and we build their capacity and we bring our logistics capacity to try and link them to global markets. And the assumption is that if their businesses grow, then they are going to be buying from the smallholder. Because just to address the smallholder, while the focus of the solution is always on their production or the productivity, the transport and logistics, which is the connection between them and the market, is often forgotten. So it's important to understand that during the crisis, that got worse. They had even fewer options to get their produce to the market. So I would recommend that in the recovery, the first thing we need to do is talk to each other like this. And the second thing is that transport and logistics has to really be part of it. And why do I say that? I've realized that most of the value of our dollars, if you take away tourism, are coming from fresh produce. But we've also noticed as a company that we've not built the capacity to reduce losses. And why am I saying that? If you're coming from a weak position or a weakened position, the last thing you need is to lose what you've produced. So if you have aggregation of farmers' output, say in Semuto, of tomatoes, and they somehow have to end up in Sudan or DRC, the capacity to handle them in Semuto and keep them in a state of consumption to qualify to enter markets is not there, and that needs to be looked at. It's one of those areas that can create better resilience going forward. And to summarize, the microstructure of the markets is important. See, when you go to a stock market to buy shares, you go through a broker, but that broker is selling your shares, and the percentage he's gonna get is known. We've also noticed because some of the desperate businessmen ended up in our office to help them with moving their goods. And we've noticed that the farmer is at a disadvantage when dealing with transporters because the sector is very informal. And when it goes to the market, the dealer has the power in the relationship. And so it doesn't matter how much intervention you do at the supply level and the farm level. The fact that when the output finally comes out, they don't have bargaining power, it's creating a disincentive to production. That's what we've discovered. And so participating in connecting the farmer to the market and making sure that their produce doesn't go bad becomes very important to sustain recovery. There are some markets that have done well where we can benchmark, and as a company we are going to do something like this in Kenya. We've benchmarked with the Johannesburg market. The sellers there are agents of a farmer, and then the handling is handled professionally. So the goods have more shelf life and they maintain their value. So I think with those few remarks, because of time, I would like to thank all of you for your time and then wish you the best during the recovery. We remain committed to all these projects and programs as a private sector so that we come out of the crisis together. Thank you very much.
I guess was talking about DHL, the yellow people. There are other yellow people who should be listening to this conversation. We need to digitize all the way. I liked it when the police put in something. One time police just stopped me. I was really taking advantage of a police van to drive behind, to go through the jam to Ginger. And they just flagged me down and they came and cut off my number plate. Reason I had lost one of those express things years back. And so I had to go through a lengthy process to go and sort out and get my number plate back. Now I hear they have digitized it, and I tried it out to say, does my car have any express penalty? And I sent to 888, and sure enough I had one that I wasn't even aware of. But I thought they had digitized all the way to say, do you want to pay it now? I would have paid, Mr. PSST, let's digitize all the way. You would have received my 150,000 already, but now I don't know where to start. Now I know I have it, but where do I start? So let's digitize all the way, and it's about logistics. It matters going all the way. Manufacturers, where is my friend, East African? Please give him a microphone so that he can do some 2-3 minutes from there. Hope we have a microphone there. We don't want to bother you here. There is a lot of activity here, so you can take some 3-4 minutes to tell us about the manufacturing, and then please be ready with 1 or 2 questions. And Sandra is going to pick for me what she has been gathering from the cyberspace. We want to hear from you. Thank you very much, my panelists. You'll still be here to give us maybe a closing remark or 2. East African Manufacturing?
Manufacturers Association.
You know, it is East African, but now we're here, we can't move our goods around. So is it East African? Is it what? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity. Dear PSST, Minister of Finance, the General Manager, NTV, the panel of discussants, all protocol all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Godfrey Busiku from, you allow me remove this so I can speak better. My name is Godfrey Busiku from the East African Manufacturers Association. And I want to just deliberate on a few issues, such as 1, what was the state of the manufacturing before this thing, the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a touching story. There are some of my members I talk to and they feel like crying. But remember that time of the first wave when government was asking us to house our workers. They say they cannot move to their respective homes. So COVID really hit us, He who says COVID didn't hit him or her maybe lives in another world. I'll not talk much about those stories because some of them have been deliberated in these short videos that we've just watched. But if I can speak maybe some small excerpt, there was real manufacturing going on in every sector, especially home care products, because those form most of the majority on the market. They support the informal person in downtown. But when there was this instruction of lockdown, so the entire supply chain was affected. And this really hit the entire manufacturing, because if the supply chain, if the middlemen, the retailers, the people down who are supposed to help in the actual selling of the products are disturbed, then you as the manufacturer will end up with maybe produce that is having less market. So somebody was asking me, what is this boo-boo thing, is Buy Uganda, Build Uganda, is it still relevant? Then the mixed reactions. I think yes, and also I think also no. Yes, why? Because we need to build, much as our economy is small, with 50 million consumers purportedly who are poor, that as compared to other economies that have billions of consumers, I think we need a lot of repackaging of this Buy Uganda, Build Uganda thing. It's a nice policy project, whatever it is, but how is it being packaged? What are the checks and balances for the Buy Uganda and Build Uganda? Maybe my opinion would be if maybe government would reflect on what they did for now the late Murwana. Bring in some numismatism. So we have a few patents and what for particular products. Let's say, for instance, we're allowing this person, this manufacturer, to do batteries, and no one should bring batteries from Kenya. From where? From China. And maybe that would help the policy of Buy Uganda and Build Uganda. Also on the relevance of East African value chains, I think the same applies to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Ladies and gentlemen, PSST, we have an issue here. There's a lot, I think it's politicking or political will, I don't know. The same issues affecting us as manufacturers in the entire region. Because you'll get politicians at the whatever level in State House Kenya, State House Uganda, saying, we're going to dance to this tune, East African Customs Union. We are going to respect the African Continental Free Trade Area. Let's stop some paper. The manufacturer on ground finds issues at the customs, saying, sorry, that is a pipeline. So relax, first pay the tax. So maybe we need to walk the talk and have most of these things addressed. Apparently, we have many issues which are under the challenges of manufacturers. I already mentioned the political will for some of the decisions or acts of laws of respective countries. 2 years ago, a country here in 6th Street, I mean not a country, a company, told me, Mr. Godfrey, we've been in existence for now 19 years. We have product A, B, C, D, G. But certifying this new product to make F has taken us 3 years. UMA has done the best job, PSFU has done the best job, but a lot of this bureaucracy and corruption and what at UNBS and other certification agencies of government. maybe I would reckon the same comment as other panelists, that as government, you help us and work on the digitization of most of these clearances to the manufacturers. Maybe that will help us. Another challenge that we have is this, I don't know whether it's double taxation or because there are about 5 companies that have rushed to us saying, sir, we try to import materials, then government taxes us excise duty on raw materials, then you have to also pay tax on exports, then you have to pay tax on what? At the end of the day, they are discouraging many things. They are discouraging employment, because this investor will say, now I'm putting in a lot onto raw materials, what tax. So at the end of the day, he'll have to scale down so many of the things. And eventually, who's the loser? The tax collector. Because the scenario for Uganda, I move around East Africa. I was in Kenya last week. You'll get Kenya not levying a tax on excise duty for raw materials that are imported. The same to Tanzania. But here it is happening. So I think some of these things need to be revised to help the manufacturers in Uganda. So the same issue in terms of challenges, we have the poultry issue that we're trying to also do regional advocacy. Mr. PSST, this is addressed to you, and I hope that His Excellency the President is watching us. If he's not, please deliver this concept. Yes. The East African Manufacturers Association, on behalf of the private sector in Uganda, wishes to request government of Uganda to think about appointing ambassadors of trade. Yes, we have an ambassador of Uganda to Kenya, but he has a pile of issues, political, social, economic issues. Let's look at ambassadors of trade in countries of interest. If we have something of interest in China, can we have resourceful people? I see Dr. Magi Chigozi here. I see very eloquent people here. Can they help us bring in more investments? And way forward, before I make my concluding remarks, what is our prayer as manufacturers? To government, our prayer is, let's have the policy of Uganda first. It starts from there. Uganda first. And if I can make a small comment on the education sector, some of the ideas fronted are very wonderful. We welcome them. And I also happen to come from World Skills Uganda. So I think skilling is more important. The vocational element of helping our children to have skills is very, very important. Thank you for listening to me. Together, I think we are looking forward to opening an economic recovery. And like the PSST said, I also remind the manufacturers to get vaccinated, have the workforce vaccinated, because that would be the only vehicle to have the entire economy open. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Godfrey Busikwe. Position from the manufacturers that it matters to them who represents us in the different countries. PSST, you rightly mentioned market access and penetration. How do we penetrate these markets? Part of this has got to do with the diplomats we have out there. Some comments in here. I wanted to really throw something to Patrick Ayota. Me and him come from far. Are we really running a market economy, or an economy that is marketized? What is it? People keep saying markets don't work, or do they work? Are we running that thing? I hear you have invested our money in the neighboring markets, and what is it that you're looking for? Patrick.
Thank you very much. And briefly, I think the last speaker from the manufacturing and then also the logistics touched on something. In Uganda, we've focused so much on the supply side of the economy production. You look at NAS, look at Operation West creation. We are focusing so much on that, thinking that the problem is supply. And I've always given an example. At the beginning of the maize growing season, all farmers, NADS distributes hybrid seeds, tells the farmers to grow. The price of maize is 700 shillings a kilo. They all grow. 4 months later, they all harvest. The price of maize is 200 shillings. And the maize rots. 3 months later, the price of maize is back to 600, which tells you the problem is not supply, it is demand. And until we Ugandans begin to think about the market before we grow, won't get there. Recently I spoke to a friend of mine, high-level government official, and was bragging how they have put an association of grain growers, and they're planning to have 700,000 tons of maize. And I said, okay, so where are you going to sell it? And there was no answer. And I'm going to give an example of what happens in Kenya. When Kenya blocks our maize, it's not a private sector blocking it. It's a government. Kenya has got a parastatal called Kenya Seed Authority, under which they've got maize, sorghum, soybean, you name it, with this following mandate, that you will help develop the growth of quality seed and aggressively sell it, expand the market locally and in the region. This is a parastatal. What do you have in Uganda to counter that? None. Kenya, you've got the Kenya Dairy Authority with the same mandate to make sure that they develop the dairy industry in Kenya and expand the market. What do you have on the Uganda side? The Dairy Authority in Uganda. If you read the mandate of that, it says this: the Dairy Authority of Uganda has the mandate to regulate and to monitor the development and the markets of dairy. Nothing about marketing. In fact, PSST, you said something very interesting. The reason why coffee has expanded and has grown, if you look at the mandate of the Coffee Development Authority in Uganda, it has 4. It deals with regulation, deals with the quality, it deals with marketing. They negotiate with the International Coffee Authority. So part of the solution is this. And I've always thought I was a pure capitalist, but I'm a social capitalist now. Let's revive some of these parastatals. So state to state, they can go ahead and open up markets for us. I give a good example. We've been in Somalia for 15 years. We pacified Somalia. What have we sold to them? We in Southern Sudan, we pacified Southern Sudan. What do we sell to them? And yet other countries came and sold. We know Somalis eat rice. 185 million worth of that last year. I know we have a gap in the growing of rice, but heck, there could be a market. Egypt imports 2 million tons of grain. The Nile starts from here. Why can't we sell our maize to Egypt? But it cannot be done state to state. So let's revive some of these parastatals and compete with them, because Elato Dairy going to Kenya is a single organization. There is no way they can counter that government entity called Kenya Dairy Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Institutions are going to be necessary to do forceful negotiations and actually push, but also very strategic. We are doing roads in the DRC. I was reading the East African, and they talked of Equity Bank, which has already mobilized $4.5 billion to finance the trade in the DRC. Now, Equity Bank is about $8.9 billion in assets. So for them, they are taking over Katamba's business, and we are doing the roads. In DRC. So I think we need to see how DFCU gets in there. This conversation is going to continue because we really want to continue. Any comments or questions from anybody before yes, please. A microphone over there. We want to have some quick solutions. What do we need to be doing? How do we take advantage of the emerging DRC market? By the way, that market has been there, but now it's getting a little bit more peaceful. They're getting a little bit richer. PSSC talked about the gold. Gold really used it to roll out the DRC trade in Uganda. They sell gold here, the money they use, they buy things and go back. Now we have issues with gold, and I think the Minister of Finance needs to get back to Parliament and we resolve some of these issues. You made proposals and Parliament changed them. That has disrupted the industry, as you mentioned in the figures. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, moderator, and thanks to the PS and the discussants. I would like to add my voice on, especially that the previous speakers, on the issue of trade. For me, I really believe that we can trade our way out of poverty because we have the land, we have the climate, we have the resources. But the supply, the previous speaker, the supply is also the problem because trade is about a certain specific product for a certain specific market. So we are producing a lot. We produced pineapples, but not for the right market. So the challenge is how to link the production to the market. And we can be able to do that because a number of countries today are putting in place production agreements. We have seen this in Kenya. They are sending their avocados to China. They negotiated even the type of avocados, the quality, you know. So we need to do that because our trade has been characterized by rejections because we produce, the market rejects them. So we need to work on that. And for me, I think that we answer the question which the PS raised regarding the issue of market access and market entry. Because for sure you have negotiated so many markets. The EU, everything but arms, the tripartite, COMESA, SADC, ESC, AGOA. You know, we have all these markets, but we can't, like you pointed it out, enter them. So we have to do something. You know, the backward linkages, we need to work on them. And for me, I really thought that we can take some time for us to be able to discuss this question. How do we use these markets? And then also another issue is that our private sector, you should be mindful of the commitments we go into. We are negotiating the CFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area, you know. But you ask 95% of the private sector, they even don't know what CFTA means in full, let alone knowing what we are negotiating. Let me give you an example. Because we need to link our trade policy and our industrial policy. When you look at what we have negotiated, for example, we are protecting maize, corn. We are liberalizing starch. Yet we are talking about pharmaceutical industrialization. And starch is one of the products, but we are liberalizing it. You know, so you look at the contradictions between what we are saying in trade and what we are doing as industrial policy. And one of the discussants talked about ensuring that we harmonize our policies. Lastly, Chair, we need to, finance is critical if we are to revive this economy. What I have heard here, the PS was lamenting, and if I can quote him, that the lending rate is 19%, and he's asking why somebody was supposed to answer your question, he didn't. And I think it's Professor Sejaka who was also
They both know the answer. They both know the answer. They just didn't tell us.
They didn't tell us. Okay. Professor Sejaka was also saying that maybe the banks should forgive some businesses. And he answered that I don't think they will do it. What I see here is a sector which is privately controlled, but which we are, as government, you are demanding from it to do certain things, which they are not going to do. So in the post-COVID recovery, I think it's very important for government to rethink the banking sector. And I have heard so many times, Bank of Uganda puts in place the CBR and it's ignored. And we continue, So finance is key to the recovery of this economy, and the government has to do something around that. I think I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen Nalunga. Just in case you didn't know who that was, he's raised quite a number of very touching things. For me, one was, we are negotiating CFTA, and the private sector is not involved. So who is we? If we can negotiate a trade arrangement and the people to participate in the trade are not involved, Julius Mukunda, you don't need to answer that one. The microphone to him, he'll be my last on the floor, and then I'll do, I hope you really give me 1 minute each, especially somebody who has been scratched, because I want to get back to the PSST to wind up this. Yeah, he has carried notes. And thank you very much. This is a conversation that is jointly sponsored between the Ministry of Finance, the NTV, to make sure you all participate in this. And then we get quite critical partners like DFCU and many others that usually join us. This conversation is for real. Julius.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, the panelists and the PS. Fred, I think there's somebody who's trying so hard these days to make us jobless, because a number of things we try to raise, they are raising them, which I think is very good, because we are now speaking the same language. And I think the challenge now is for us to monitor and see how we can accomplish these things. I have 3 points. One is, I think digitization is good, PS, but you know very well how it can also drain your treasury. We have all these systems in the government. Some are foreign, some are internal, and we know how to do a system. It would cost you billions to bring it on board, and also billions to maintain it. I'm looking forward for a policy whereby at least some of these digitization platforms are done by our Ugandan boys and girls. We have examples that have worked very well, and also we know those that are international that we can't even touch because they say you don't have the source code. So I'm looking forward for that PS. 2, for me, is let us behave in a government that these are times of crisis, and we behave the same way. And I think one of our panelists talked about change of lifestyle. Because if, for example, that the cost of running our government is extremely so high, what can we do to make sure we bring it low? There is one thing we can do, Fred. And I think the general manager NTV talked about one government. This bottle of Renzo mineral water, if you go to Ministry of Finance, you'll find it at 2,000. Go to other departments, different prices. The supplier is one, supplying the same client in the same region, not even outside the Kampala, but different prices and far apart. Can we have a price list for this government? So that I know a school costs this amount of money to construct. I know a Sumbusa in this department costs this amount. If you want to supply government, you know the price, so that we are not cheated. I think that way, PSU could save some money. Lastly, for me, I think you touched on the business of incremental budgeting should stop. And I entirely agree with you. But can we get closer to zero budgeting? I have been having 5 workshops last year, or this year I should still have the same workshops. I've been buying 2 vehicles last year. This year I should buy the same 2 vehicles. I think it's time, PSS, that we try to promote that. In that way, our planning, and I agree with Madam Private Sector, our planning can be in sync with our budget. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Julius Mukunda. Now I see a hand there. Let's pick up that one hand, and this is the last on the floor. There is somebody over there. Sandra wants to make sure you do not infect her, or the other way around. She's more like, both of you are likely to survive. You are not my age group. You are not in senior 3 before Museveni came to power.
Don't worry, I'm in support of vaccination. I'm fully vaccinated, so...
Your 2 minutes have started.
Thank you very much. My name is Terence Jason Tumwine. I am a representative from the Capital Markets Authority, and someone talking about financing, which is our mandate to develop, like Patrick said, to also ensure that as many people as possible can access financing. I'm looking to government for all things. I see there's a bit of private sector, please do something on this. Government, give handouts. Government, I feel, in my personal opinion, can do so much. We want to encourage as many people as possible to seek ways of financing. Capital markets shows different ways. You can, for the companies that are struggling, list a corporate bond which can float on the government bond as one of an example. The government bonds, we are happy that PSST mentioned that they are looking towards opportunities of growing the longer term dated bonds. We feel that will help government in terms of repayment, to reduce the pressure that it already has, and also to allow it to structure infrastructure bonds on other, and focusing on development of other infrastructure programs, which I think are key to allowing us to develop. Going forward, we think that the economy is going to grow. We think, as the Minister said, is on its trajectory, and we are very, very confident that it shall grow in the right direction. But that said, private equity is an option that we can re-explore. Private placements are an option that people are looking towards. Investing in small businesses. I've been engaging my friend, Mr. Walugembe. People are looking to invest in small businesses, and these are all forms of the capital markets, and we're happy to embrace that through private placements and corporate bonds. My submission. Thank you so much, Fred. Doctor.
Thank you very much for bringing that on board. It's a good way to end this conversation from the floor, but not the conversation going forward, because many questions are going to the bankers. Bankers provide debt financing. What about equity financing? Is anybody speaking to that conversation? And I'm glad the PSST here is seated with the UDC. Sometimes I keep thinking, the money we send to UDB to create debt for private sector, why don't we send it to UDC and create equity for the private sector? And they hold our equity stake with a view of, this is a conversation we really want to have. Now I wanted to run around really here on my floor with 1 minute each. Mr. Katamba, you were touched. But even before they touched you, you possibly wanted to touch us as well. You have the floor.
So thank you very much. I think that once again I want to thank Monitor, NTV, for the forum, and I think we need to have many more forums like this one, because the private sector needs to come together a little bit much more often with government to harmonize information, right? Because this thing is about information. The more we realize that we are all interlinked, the better, and we are all after the same thing. The growth and development of the private sector is largely made possible by the existence of a banking system, and banks in particular. So if you look at what we do and what we contribute to the development of businesses in good times, it kind of puts into perspective what is happening in times like now, because we are all constrained. Like I mentioned earlier, we not only support the private sector, but when rates are good like they are now and government comes into the market, we will also put those resources in government paper. So it is just really the way it is. If government is borrowing, it is a risk-free kind of lending, we will do it. I just say to you, the PSST has come into the market with 3.7 trillion. What banks will respond, and that's the rate. The risk-free rate will set what the rates are. So CBI is at 6.5%, yes, but look at where the rest of the rates are for government paper. That's just one thing. But banks are responsible. And if you look at a period like now, we are making a series of concessions for the education sector, for instance. And you will have seen a number of these also as set out also by the regulator in the extension for the compliance accommodations for the education sector and the hospitality sector, waivers on early repayment, 0% interest on those restructured facilities under the current compliance accommodations up to the end of September 2022, waivers on penalty interest and things like that to try and enable those sectors to continue. See, our ability, all of us, to mobilize domestic savings will determine the ultimate pricing eventually for money in the country. Our savings rates as a country are significantly low. So when banks source for money from you as individuals, we pay interest on your accounts. When we go outside to source from external financiers, we pay interest on that. There is a cost of capital, etc. And of course, you must look at what's going to happen in this period, which is going to be the cost of default. That is going to be huge for this period. Like I mentioned, the ultimate impact on the economy, the private side of the economy, a significant part of it will be felt in the balance sheets of banks. So we are completely in this together. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's important to note that as we get poorer, mobilizing savings becomes more expensive, and then the loans become more expensive. We are in this together. How do we break that cycle? Household incomes, so that they can save more, and then you would have cheaper sources of funds and lower the cost. Where do we start? The PSS will be coming last. Professor Sejak.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhumuza. I want to go out on a positive note, and I first want to recognize that development is a painful process. Because we have short lifespans, we want things to happen in our lifetime. But I must be the first to admit that a lot of things have changed. While you were in S4, I was joining the Ministry of Finance, so a lot of things have changed.
One thing hasn't changed. You're still a senior to me and the PSST.
Thank you, thank you. Some things I can't change. But I have given way to you two people, so that's a good thing. So you guys know better than me now, and you must be doing better things. But if we are going to change, we need, if we are going to revive the education sector and have the socioeconomic transformation, which is in the NRM manifesto, we need to have coordinated efforts involving all stakeholders. If we do that, we shall rise again. To the bankers, I really want to say that the economy is circular. if you, the most privileged people, are not willing to give up something, everybody ultimately loses. So you are talking about moratoriums, and I'm watching this language. Remember, I've been on boards of banks for a very long time, 16 years of board work. So I know the language. You are talking of moratorium, but that is not debt forgiveness. We are kicking the can down the road. So at one point, we have to deal with this animal of debt by institutions which have been closed, of debt in an economy that has been underperforming. We all have to deal with it, and there has to be give and take. But definitely, if we work together, if we continue having these kinds of conversations, yes, we can, and we will. I thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, we can, and yes, we will. The conversations have to continue. Tourism. Where is the next dollar? The other people who bring in dollars, not just you alone. But where do those dollars go? 1.6 billion. I should be getting something. You have the floor for one minute.
Thank you, Doctor. Three things. Just to thank the Ministry of Finance for giving us this framework. Thank NTV again for 5 years in a row, minus 1 year. I think that is still good. Maybe as we move forward, we probably need to, as a precursor to the series, we also need those recommendations that you bring forward. You tell us exactly where we've been with them, how far we've gone with the implementation, so that we move to the next series, the sixth one. I think the fifth one, we need to see how this can be implemented. Just as I said, tourism is an easy sector in terms of limited barriers to entry, and the value chain is very, very long, and it accommodates all of us. Yeah, easy to enter, limited barriers really, and I think we can all Ugandans take care of this and take advantage of this. The parish model actually drives it home more easily. So again, we thank the architect of the parish model, and for us as UTB, as the tourism sector, we think it is easy to take tourism home more easily. It's a sector that will bring happiness. It's a sector that is multi-sectoral. You can get tourism medical, get tourism education, get tourism in oil and gas, get tourism in logistics, get tourism in home care and all this. So again, it is a sector that can accommodate all of us. It's easy to make dollars out of it, again, without exporting anything, but really this is the real dollars that we can get out of this. But let's all have a responsibility to make our country attractive and competitive. In all this, we have a role to play, and for us as the marketeers, as the regulators, I think we bank on you really to make sure that you have a product that really can be sold. But thank you.
Thank you very much. I may have talked about the dollars that I don't see, but they actually help us. PSST talked about one of the three core things that we'll be focusing on: national security and macroeconomic stability. Stabilizing the shilling requires lots of dollars at this time. Otherwise, fuel would be 5,000 if the dollar was 3,800. So the contribution of the tourism dollar, I feel that everything I see that palm price go up, I'm like, it could have been worse if those tourists were not coming through. That's the economics working for you behind the scenes. So it's important, national security and macroeconomic stability. Logistics.
Thank you. Just before, logistics, we deal with trade. And there's an interesting commission. It was called the Blair Commission that investigated the impact of aid in Africa for the last 50 years. And the results were not very positive. However, it has been discovered that trade can create transformation. In logistics, we deal with trade practically, not theoretically. But we exist within a theoretical framework of rules. Once the rules are clear, the trade flows. Once the systems are stable, the trade flows. And when the trade flows, incomes increase and outcomes are better. Now, speaking of finance, it's an area, just like logistics, that intersects with everything else that we do. And I wanted to bail out our sponsor a little bit here, that we've had some experiences of financial crisis, and there has been a template of dealing with them where the solution is not debt. The solution is the capital structure. Dr. Muhumuza, as you know, is made up of both own funds, equity, and debt. And there is a general obsession in Uganda with debt, without discouraging or disparaging the contribution of the banking sector. The banking sector is also limited if equity does not expand, because the amount of capital you raise depends on the equity that you have on your balance sheet. And you see Mr. Ayota is sitting there, he always has an open check, provided you have the right instrument. So I would like to encourage our policymakers to give as much attention to equity markets. One of the examples I can give is there are financial investors. There are companies that venture into companies with the intention of reselling them. They're called private equity firms, venture capital firms. And these companies have been incentivized in the Kenyan market that when you're selling, your capital gains tax is not the same as that of a corporate. And that policy measure can easily create a better inflow of equity, which then would create some relief for the debt stress in the market. Now, lastly, when we think about recovery, one area that I wanted to touch on again that will be very important is post-harvest handling. And as a private sector in logistics, we are going to take a lot more interest in this, because our challenge has been that there are so many producers, and that means that the concept of how markets are built in Uganda has to change. The market needs to be stopped to be equated to a building. It needs to have some essential services like cold chains in the whole flow of how the transport moves. And that brings me to who talked about the market in Egypt and why we can't reach there. I can give you the answer. The moment you load maize in a container and take it to Mombasa, you have already outcompeted yourself. That takes me to the last point, that when COVID happened and our drivers could not move goods at the speed at which we wanted them, some of us lost sleep, because they kept saying, okay, you guys in cargo, you can still move around. It didn't make sense if you are still waiting for 1 month to bring goods that are badly needed. And so there was a bit of pressure. The lesson we learned is that when it comes to sustenance of international trade and regional trade, a focused strategy on what value chains you're dealing with and the practical way of handling them, which is the transport infrastructure, are intertwined. And the short of it is that we missed our railway at that point, because I was thinking, okay, you need one guy in one carriage to carry billions or tons and tons of cargo. And we didn't have that alternative. And so when it comes to maintaining economic security in terms of trade, the different linkages that we have to different countries, we need to diversify them. And those that are not competitive, it makes sense the government to carry the heavy back to make the investments with the help of Mr. Ayota, who's got plenty of savings that are long-term savings. And I'm always wondering, I was challenging my Dr. Muhumuza, why is it that we have long-term savings invested in short-term instruments? And that mismatch defeats the GDP identity, which gives you a qualification that investment is equal to saving. But in this case, saving is not equal to investment, because the Treasury bill does not create jobs. I'm not saying it's bad to do that, but if the financial system does not create a scenario where the right savings can go to the right investment, then we have work to do. So thank you so much.
That also speaks to the need to actually revive the railway line, because that is quite a critical component of the logistics. Honorable Victoria Secretary, your last message in 2 minutes.
Yeah, like I said earlier, Uganda should continue to educate, develop, train, and skill our human resources. After that, we should remunerate them fairly and treat them with respect. 2, let every parish, now that we are going parish model, let every parish develop a commodity to sell. This way we can work on the quantity, quality, and sustainability. This harmony in policy, Mr. PSST, the private sector is ready, willing, and available to participate right from the beginning to the end. COVID. Mr. PSST, I wonder if anybody is doing any research to find out why Ugandans did not die, especially the rural ones. I was at a wedding last Saturday. There were about 700 of us, and there were only 4 masks. And this was, I told you I'm from Butambala. It was a Muslim wedding. They cook pilau. We all sit down and eat, and nobody is dying. Can somebody carry out a research as to how we have survived? And along those lines, I want to add to the tourism sector. One of the reasons people come to Uganda is actually traditional medicine tourism. But we all don't want to talk about it. We hide it under the table. For me, I know. Fortunately, I'm an old woman, and old women are supposed to be knowing the medicines. So, Mr. PSST, while you are at it looking for where to get money from, how to enter markets, let us take our traditional medicines officially. How do we do it? Let us implement the Traditional Medicines Act of Parliament. Because apparently now, Ministry of Health is led by born-again Christians, and they think that those of us who talk about traditional medicine are witches. so please liberate us and let us do our business openly. I thank you.
Mr. PSST, I don't need the witch to invite you. But certainly you have the last word on this. Thank you, everybody who has been with us. But that's the economy you run. It is formal, it is informal, it is English, scientific medicine, and witchcraft. But you don't need witchcraft to move the economy, PSST.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhumuza, and all of the panelists. You've really talked, and conversations are good. But next time we talk again, let us talk more solutions. You identify a problem, and the PSST, this is the solution. There are some solutions, of course, I've got. Thank you very much, especially those which are strategic interventions. Because as the superintendent of the economy, I would want to concentrate more on the strategic issues that are affecting us. The operational ones are many, but you will find they are symptoms of a disease. So I know we have talked about a number of things, interns who have not yet got money, teachers, circles. You will find the issues there, they are real operational issues. I provided the money is provided. So the issues we need to be discussing is the efficiency of government. And that's what I said. How do we make government more efficient? We are saying we should digitize systems, automate systems, but also rationalize ourselves so that government has very good interlinkages, and we are able to solve problems quickly. But when you have a government where we are writing letters and they are spending on their way a week to get people paid, that's a problem. So I don't want to come and say, now the interns are this. The interns, I provided the money. You saw it in the papers, and you Their money is there. But they haven't gotten the money. So, those are the issues we needed to discuss on how do we make government efficient. The reward system, Professor Sejaka, is in our strategy, as you will hear. I minister talking. I came here with mainly those issues which I thought were strategic enough to revamp the economy, and I ask you to give me advice on them. Do you feel comfortable with them, or we need to tweak some of them? One of those which are so strategic is what Matthias is talking about. You know, Matthias and I, we've had this conversation. Patrick was saying he was going to provide a ring where we should sort out ourselves on who is causing the problem. And I understand where we are coming from, all of us. Matthias, I want to tell you, reduce your appetite. I might not give you those trillions you're talking about. You wait, you will see. Reduce appetite, give people money at good rates. If you're waiting for my kind of auctions, okay, keep waiting. You might burn your fingers. But the bottom line is, we need, in January, going forward, to have an economy which is more open, more vibrant. I've been very vocal on getting the entire economy reopened. I know it is some bits of it are reopened unofficially, but that's also a problem, because it actually kind of impedes the multiplier effect on the economy. So let's get our children back to school. The mourning of 2 years, they have been home. They have been home. How do we get them to school and sustain them there? Because what for me I'm more, and I'm looking at it as a risk, is getting them back to school, and then we get a resurgence, and we have to take them back again, home. So we should concentrate all our conversations, and I like what Professor Sejaka said, all stakeholders. How do we get these children to school and we keep them in school? How do we get the bars reopened and we keep them open? How do we get the hotels, like where we are here, get the traffic back and they keep going? So let's suggest more solutions than the questions. Me, you know, I built my career in academia, but I used to do one thing, to anchor my analysis and everything I say on providing an alternative solution, and in most cases a researched one. So I would want the private sector, and Madam Sechitoreko has been talking about, why don't you involve us? She was in my building the other day. She's not telling you. You know, the private sector in Uganda, I've been actually trying to see how do we work more practically and productively. Because the private sector in Uganda is also like a government, a bit disorganized. We need to organize ourselves and put government to tenterhooks on how do we make things work better. I want to tell you, I'm going to support reforms that work. There's no question about that. I've told my colleagues in the government, I know some of them are watching. Anyone who thinks that we can do things the way we have always been doing them and they haven't worked should not be in a special accounting positions. They will get out of the accounting positions and leave the people who can do the things differently to work. So generally, let us concentrate on the strategic issues. That parish development model is being emphasized because, and Mama Secretary, I talked about it in my speech for financial inclusion. We're emphasizing it because Ugandan economy tends to be discussed in a skewed manner. When we sit in hotels with the air condition here, we think this is the economy of Uganda. My dear, there are people of Uganda who have not seen 10,000 shillings since this year began. It is going to end now. Those are the people we want first and foremost to include in this economy, such that all of us can become productive and we don't use partial equilibrium analysis of the economy, but general equilibrium. As Dr. Muhumuza tells the students, in Uganda we have a lot of partial analysis of things. The economy which is not working for a few people who are in Kampala, Greater Kampala metropolitan area, where actually 66% of the GDP is generated. Can you imagine? We want to concentrate on that. No, we are saying let us be transformative by engaging in interventions that can pull more people into the monetized economy so that we can be able to have what we call a private sector, and it is the true private sector, not government money making circles, you know. It can't work that way. I've picked some critical things like the price of internet. I told my people in finance there are certain things we must look into, and I instituted 3 major studies. Because you know me, unlike certain people who want to do things differently, I want to do things where I have a chance of success calculated. I'm saying, let us review certain things, like, for example, our tax regime. When we tax internet, do we get more revenue than the multiplier effect that the internet would have created in the economy, so that I tax the activities that come out of that? These are the things we are studying now. And we want scientific data, and then we implement. The same with this so-called tax base. We have talked about it in so many conferences. I don't know how many times I've sat on these chairs talking about the same. Now I'm saying, now I have opportunity to be in another chair. Let us look and see. When all of these Ugandans who are in what we call the sum, because all activities we do can be condensed in a smaller model. Who are those ones who are paying tax? Who are those ones who are earning money and they are not paying tax? And so on and so forth. Then, how do we get those who are not paying also pay a little, and then we get more tax revenue? We have an analysis which is going to inform us, and we shall need all your involvement as private sector. The stimulus we are putting up, and we have been putting up, is not very small, by the way. In the small economy, I know Dr. Muhumuza wanted to make us look small. No. We are having over $1 trillion shillings out there, but I know that throwing money around is not the solution. But where do we and how is the most critical thing. Now, these days, we are working with these people to ensure that we incentivize both the financial sector and also the recipients of these efforts of government. If you want money from government, pass via an institution which can assess and reduce what we call adverse selection in economics, selecting bad risk all the time. You know, adverse selection is bad risk. Usually people who are not willing to pay back, they are the first one to line up. When they get money. They had very good ideas before they had the money. They are going to do poultry. They tell you, I'll have so many birds. The moment they get the money, what they were writing in the plan as a house for the birds now becomes a house for themselves, or a car or a mobile phone. Now, that's what we call moral hazard. They change the mind. Again, there are people who can help us. So we are saying we want to use more pragmatic ways of doing things now. Pragmatism calculates the chance of success. But the problem is not money. Uganda is very rich. It's about how do we really do things to ensure that this money we have. I know many times we are obsessed with the public debt. Have we asked ourselves about private debt? We usually say Uganda is a poor, indebted country, you know, highly indebted country. In those days we had HIPIC. Did you know that we could be having highly indebted poor individuals? Because people are borrowing just to enjoy themselves. They say life is short. Let me enjoy. But they don't die, and now they create problems for themselves. So we are saying, in all of this, how do we also look into how the banking sector works? I'm so happy that this has been raised. You know, we are having a conversation, and I told Matthias when we were in Chankwanzi, you know, we went to Chankwanzi to discuss with the private sector CEOs. How do we make each other work better? I told him that, look, and the bankers, in Uganda we have a credit reference bureau whose job is to check on us who are borrowers that we don't cheat the bank. But there is no customer reference bureau to ensure that they also check on the banks so that they don't cheat us. Now, this one, this morning I was having a conversation again with a group of wonderful ladies who are coming with a very nice idea. I'm very ready to implement these ideas. And we are going to soon have a conversation with the regulators of banks. How do we ensure that both sides are protected? Now, what am I saying? Kindly bring your ideas which are practical, tested, good. We are ready to implement them. Tourism. You see, tourism We over talk about tourism, but the tourism people, I think they are like rich people. They don't know how to sell their plans. I always ask, what is the plan? What do we do? Recently, they sold the plan to me, but they have refused to sell it to you today. I'm going when I'm a bit doubtful, but we need to have a clear plan, and the government is ready to support that plan on how do we revive the tourism sector. Tangible things. Similarly, I know logistics is a binding constraint which we are trying to address, and of course, we are repairing our railway. We are spending about 300 billion to get the railway, the meter gauge function again. It's not the best and efficient, most efficient, but we have realized it's far better than the system we are having now. As we embark on the most ambitious one of the standard gauge railway to connect us to the sea in a more sustainable way. All of these other things of my friend in the logistics, they are going to be handled the moment you reduce the cost of transport from Mombasa to Kampala. Or else others we shall be in some heartwarming stories until we put up a line which can haul the goods cheaply. We are very expensive in Uganda in transport. My good friend Jenny said, you know, we have been having conversation. Thank you very much for your brilliant ideas. You know, the challenge we have with our trade policy and industrial policy in Uganda or in East Africa, these East African nations, we sit in our different countries and we come up with the policies. Like the industrial policies we come up with, we need to align them. We need to have the conversations at East Africa. Who should produce what? Now we are all producing maize. So we will buy the maize of each other. That's why we start closing the borders. We all produce milk. We all produce, now there is Hass avocado. Everybody is running to plant Hass avocado. But the first market we have is this one here, East Africa. We are producing similar things. Our comparative advantage is the same, but we have failed to sit down and agree. You produce this, where you are doing better, me I produce this. Then we exchange. Basic economics we learned. We are all producing similar things, then we are saying we are East African community. And we end up fighting when we have all harvested. And we start closing the borders. But as I said, we are now working on market entry. We are going to support. We have already started, by the way. My people are not here. Export promotion, they are in Dubai looking for markets. I made them sign on a paper. I said, I'm a different kind of spend of money. You sign here, you tell me, we are going to go to Dubai and bring so much trade by this time. You fail to bring it, you pay back the money. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I know the list of the issues has been long. I've noted all of them. And we are going to be, some of them have helped us to sharpen the strategy going forward. But also we need to remember all things are not going to be done next year. Uganda is not ending next year. So we are phasing these things in a sequence, kind of sequenced manner within the medium term. Such that we do certain things first, then other things follow. But we ensure that we address all these things, like these capital markets we are talking about. You can't develop a country without capital markets. Recently, MTN went public. It's now a PLC. In the room here, I don't know how many people bought shares. But you'll find that most of us are doing business. Like Charles, my senior, Charles Simbire. You know, Charles Simbire was the first man to offer me a job when I left university. I just refused to go because it was in Mbarara, and I didn't know Mbarara. But he told me then, when I was a younger man, 2003, that, younger man, when you, in the future, you make some money and you want to invest, always look for how do you invest very small in a big company. Don't look for how do I own the entire small business. Own very small in a big company. The return on investment will be higher. I learned that. Ever since I left school, that's how I've been surviving, by investing very small in big companies around the world. But you see, in Uganda we think that business is when you own a kiosk, and another one, and another, and another. Sometimes these capital markets, the reason you are seeing some countries' economies working better than others, because they pool, small money, and they make big money. And then they invest, and those businesses are sustainable. So we are going to encourage more big companies to initiate IPOs. But I don't want only the man who has our man of workers to be the only one subscribing, buying. All of us, we should invest in this, then we shall pool this money and drive the country forward. Bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, we want to build an economy that works for everybody, not just for a few of us. That's why we should support initiatives that are bringing more people into the economy. Support them. Don't ridicule them. They are more actually transformative than us just putting the efforts around here. I thank you very much today. I thank NTV and my ministry. You know, there are people behind. I have some team there that have always been knocking, PSST, we must have this conversation. I thank them so much. I thank the panelists and all those who have been viewing and sending in feedback, and all of you participants. But most importantly, I thank the Ugandans who work and pay tax. Because it is that tax revenue which makes us able to run this economy and do a few things that we are doing. And I insist, the future is bright. You wait, you are going to see. Please don't die. You will see the future getting better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. PSST. That was a remark to the nation, not just to us in here. Thank you, the panelists. You may want to resume your seats. We have a cocktail. Sandra, why don't you come and announce this one? We have a cocktail, so please do not go away. It's almost curfew time, almost. But if you don't want to get stuck around Serena, that's the very reason you should join us for the cocktail, so that by the time we are done with the last glass, the traffic will have gone down for you to reach and get stuck elsewhere. We want to appreciate your input, and I want to appreciate Sandra. Thank you so much for this support and this program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fred Muhomza. I will not add any because I think we've talked a lot about pretty much everything, and it's not fair to speak a lot after your elders have spoken. So, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause to each one of us. You've stayed here for 3 hours. We don't take that for granted, and it is for this very reason that we want to invite you to a cocktail. And our PSST, they're saying that since you're here, the curfew, we can afford to, you know, to do away with it today. But this is just to let you know that we do have a cocktail, of course, organized by NTV. Thank you so much. And the Ministry of Finance and also the DFCU. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Let us keep the conversation. And as we go, the questions around youth empowerment and also